Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap from behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. We're also on Rumble, Twitch, Twitter for now. We're on DLive. Alongside me on this flaming dumpster of a show is Fox Travis. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, all right. Not too bad. We're doing my favorite thing before the stream, which was wrestling with Streamlabs, which is my favorite part of everything that we do.
Now, we could pretend that we're sorry for this one time where we were a little bit late and pretend like we're not like days late on a pretty regular basis and that we're actually professionals. Like, I think you guys know what you got into when you started watching us. And it's kind of your fault because you guys keep funding us to make this content. So really, you should blame yourself.
Speaking of funding, we believe that we may have fixed the stream donation tickers up at the top of the screen, though we have broken other tickers in trying to fix those. But if you want to see those in action, go ahead and donate $10 or $100, and you will see them in action.
And that sounds like a shameless shill, and it is actually. Thanks for that, Fox. But we actually can't test that feature. I can send fake donations, but it won't actually update the top donations. So I don't know if it's working or not.
We could test it. We just don't want to use our own money to do it.
Yeah, I'll stop doing the show right now, real quick, and try to do that.
We very easily. And if it doesn't work, there's really nothing we can do about it once the show is live.
True. So getting back to the thank yous, thank you for everyone who makes this show possible. We blame you. Among those people are Kaylet, Ori Main, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thunder Erican, who is female, the White Lion, who's a lion, and Timberwolf, who's a wolf, and the White Wolf, and also we also had Adder Lupus. So thank you very much for all you guys' support. But you guys, even if you don't donate to us financially, you can always like, share, subscribe, but definitely go over to Rumble. Stop waiting. Just go. Just make an account, link it to whatever you got to link it to, and follow us on Rumble because we're not long for this world on YouTube. Yeah, nor do we want to support YouTube.
Now, I have heard that, I guess my Stream Deck doesn't work. Well, that's great.
That would make sense.
Yeah. I pushed on the buttons, and they just have these little, like, yellow arrows on them, like the yellow exclamation point arrows. Like, something's obviously wrong with them. I guess I will have to manually switch the scenes this time. All right. Anyways, I heard last week that the Rumble chat does not work as anticipated, and I also was not able to figure out how to get it to work. So I guess you and I will have to figure out how to. Maybe it's a setting that we've got, or maybe we don't have enough subscribers.
I'm solving one problem at a time.
Yeah. So that'll be our next problem, not next week's problem to solve. I don't want to.
Hopefully that doesn't break something completely new.
Yeah, I don't want to oversell that, but we will be looking into that. We'll be tasking Dire to look into that.
Got you. So let's get into our first funny story. I mean, some people in the news media made this into an actual full story, but for us, we're just going to watch it and laugh at them for being absurd. So the story behind this is Ron Desantis had a speech he gave, and they had some students from a local school in Florida behind him. And as he walked up, he told them that they didn't need to wear masks, that there's no need to do the COVID theater, and they can wear if they want to, but they don't need to. And they said that was him bullying the kids.
Let's watch.
Desantis made his strongest case ever for being included in the annals of America's biggest jerks. I mean, how would you describe this?
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous. All right.
Oh my God!
My
what
goodness.
a horrible man!
Holy crap! What a tyrant! Telling his peasants, that they need not cover their face in his presence, that he is, not scared of their peasant filth.
Well, since
what a tyrant
asked the question, I would characterize that as him not lying to the kids and not making them do something that is just for the theater of COVID. Because as the science has shown, we've had multiple studies now saying that those masks don't protect against COVID, and even a lot of places aren't requiring them anymore, and they're not required in Florida. So he was not saying you're bad for wearing a mask. He was simply telling them you don't have to wear the mask. The mask isn't really helping you, but you can wear it if you want to. That does not sound like a bully or a jerk to me. I think it sounds like someone's just not willing to lie to the kids.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is kind of the Republican, I guess staple at this point is for the kids, not doing bad things to them. Basically the Republican platform is to protect your kids, and the Democrat platform is to do harm to them by either covering their faces because they're filthy, even though kids are filthy, or trying to dismember them for some sexual gratification purposes, or any number of other things that the schools are attempting to do to your children, or just plain old indoctrination. Remember when they were only trying to indoctrinate our kids? Now they're trying to cut off bits of them.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah.
That kid that is the black kid with the yellow sweater right there, and black sweater,
who's all smiley and happy that he doesn't have to wear a mask right now.
Yeah, his mother actually talked to the news media after this and said she was super angry because DeSantis forced her son to take his mask off.
I believe in that interview she was not wearing a mask.
She wasn't wearing a mask, though. She was talking to the reporter and had her son behind her with a mask on, and she was so mad that the kid was forced to have his mask taken off, but he wasn't forced. He was given the option, and he chose to take it off, and you can tell from that smile he's got there, he's happy about it. He's only wearing a mask because a tyrant of a mom wants him to wear something just as a sign of obedience. And, I mean, I know she's probably a Democrat, and, I mean, Joe Biden was seen at the State of the Union also not wearing a mask in a large crowd of people. Apparently it doesn't matter to the Democrat elites anymore, so why are you forcing your kid to wear a mask?
The doctor who handles the Congress's doctor or whatever, he put out a mandate or a reversal of the mandate for masks in Congress the day before the State of the Union, and I believe that was a day after or the day of this happening. So actually DeSantis is just he's keeping up with the science, whereas MSNBC apparently is not keeping up with the science. They are preaching an anti-science, superstitious thing at this point. I mean, masking is a superstition in a lot of oppressive cultures.
It's also more of like
Where did you go?
I had to mute myself while I was taking my jacket off because I didn't want to have a really loud noise of ruffling.
Just all of a sudden you're just not there.
Yeah. So it's a way of showing what group they belong to, what tribe they're in, whether they're masked or not. That's how it's kind of developed, is how they
whether
can tell.
They're an infidel or a loyal adherent.
Right. Yeah. It's like the hijab. We're making our kids wear the face hijab.
Yes.
Basically. Okay, that was funny. They're idiots, and DeSantis is good. He's not going to lie to the kids, and he's going to shoot straight and say exactly what the reality is that the masks don't make sense and are not necessary. Let's move on to our first full story.
Yeah, which our first full story was going to be about the State of the Union, but since I already covered
with you, by the way,
I already covered the State of the Union, right, Dyer? I mean,
no, you told me you were going to do a State of the Union.
I did a stream on Tuesday. We sat down. I titled it "State of the Union," and
but you didn't actually show the State of the Union. Just like you fooled me before, you watched something different. I'm very disappointed. What I watched you do a show on was the State of the European Union. Not the State of the American Union.
Well,
and here's a clip. I want to show everyone, because you fucked up, right? I want everyone to see what you actually did a video on.
All right. Am I being admonished? Is this the admonishment section?
You are admonished.
All right.
Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. but he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of stress he never anticipated or imagined.
And
He met
already
Ukrainian people.
missing words. See, the Ukrainian people, Dyer. That's the state of our union.
This is
or the
not
state
the
of
state
Ukrainian
of
union?
Ukraine. This is supposed to be a speech where he's talking about the state of our country, what's currently going on, the successes and failures, and the way forward for our country. He spent a very large portion of his speech talking about Europe, about Russia, about Ukraine, and the future of the security of those nations.
The state of our union, the union of the globe, the union of everybody, Dyer. It's globalism. You gotta. Where have you? I know you left for a week, but did you forget that we're all globalists now? Come on, this is come on, man. We're the union of nations now. Come on.
Well, he did not. He took a large
Nazi
portion of the speech
fags.
that he could have spent.
Dare you? Jews unique.
Why would you do that?
I like how "you don't have to wear a mask" is bullying, but "wear a mask or you lose your job" is not bullying. Also, this is a test of the Dyer Emergency Broadcast System.
Thank you very much. It looks like it worked.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Yay, it did work. Okay, so
Nice.
apparently, so while I can't use my Stream Deck to change the scenes, I can use it to make sound effects.
What am I doing
Yes, you
here?
still manually activate them.
And you ain't black.
Thank you. He spent a large portion of his time on Middle East, on European affairs, and getting easy applause lines, talking about how we're going to defend democracy, right? But not actually focusing on what the State of the Union speech is supposed to be about.
And what
we
we all know that the State of the Union is a speech that is meant to address one thing and one thing only.
Nazi fags.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to know, I didn't get an update on those Nazi fags, nor did he fail to deliver on Batacalf care, nor did he mobilize Trunana Shabbat pressure. And let's not forget that he made those promises to us. Here's a couple of videos showing his promises.
I want to say something we don't say often enough, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I can tell you this. Excuse my language, but think about it. Barack and I think it's a right for people to have bad health care. For people to have bad health care.
They're
See,
really
it's a
showing
right.
themselves to do really well.
We deserve that Batacalf care.
Absolutely.
It's our right. And he hasn't given it to
Clap
us
for
yet.
that, you stupid
I'll be
bastard.
honest with you, I'm not really sure what it is, but I know it's my right, and he's going to get it to us eventually.
Well, I mean, let's take a look at. So I mean, Batacalf care. That's hard to deliver, Dyer. I mean, I think we can. It's only his first year. He's got 3 more. I think that maybe he just needs more time. But as far as True Non Shabbat pressure, international True Non Shabbat pressure, no less. I thought that I wanted True Non Shabbat pressure. I didn't realize that what we were really missing this whole time was clownfic.
We'll get into that in a second. This next clip is actually the True Anana Shabbat pressure.
Do I need to play that one too?
I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure. I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure. Just clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So, however, he did make one promise that he would keep American forces out of clownflicks. And I appreciate that.
Yes, Dyer, as somebody who would be on the front lines of a clownfic, is
yeah.
Forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine.
How on earth?
Forces are not.
How on earth did the YouTube auto transcription turn that back into conflict? Because the auto transcription picked that up. I don't know. I don't know how the hell that thing got conflict out of clownfic. Because clown is like a word. So like I would have assumed that if it heard clown, it would lock in. Like that would have a high match probability. I don't know how.
You know what's funny is when I typed in clown flicks on Google, what I got was a whole bunch of horror films that have clowns in them. Apparently that's a thing.
Dyer, what would you rather be in? Conflict or a clown fic?
Conflict sounds less scary than
I mean, in conflict you might die, but in clown fic you will die horribly.
At the hands of a clown. I don't want to live that or die that way.
It's much more terrifying.
So thank you, Biden. The one good thing in this entire speech was that you made a very reasonable promise that I hope you stick to. Keep me personally, out of clown flicks.
Well, I think that your probability of not dying in a clown fic is probably the same amount of probability that we will get bad calf care in our lifetime. So,
yep, hopefully.
Yes.
So in this, you did a very good job covering off the cuff the State of the Union. But there's some more I wanted to say about it since I couldn't be there. And just to kind of recap it, what he did during the State of the Union was he tried to take credit. First thing was take credit for the following things. The only things that he could say were victories was ending COVID restrictions and creating jobs, when in reality, both those are connected. He simply removed the boot from the neck of Americans, allowing them to get jobs again, and they didn't even make back the jobs that were lost. So just because you removed the tyrannical COVID restrictions that you imposed on us, that's not a positive. And just because when you remove those restrictions slowly over time that we started being able to go back to work, it's not a positive that you stopped not letting restricting people from being able to work and feed their families. It's still a bad thing. You just stopped doing the bad thing. That's very different from doing good.
Yes.
Then the only things after that was. So those are the only two victories he had. The rest of his speech was a stump speech saying what he would do in the future, which is not what a State of the Union is. That's the last phase of the State of the Union. The first part of it's where we are, what we've achieved, and where we're going. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. We and we did a little bit of a time breakdown after the State of the Union while it was live. I didn't have the exact figures on it, but since that episode, we've kind of been able to analyze it a little bit more. And Biden's State of the Union speech was approximately 70 minutes long, which is a little bit short. Trump would regularly go for 90 to 100 minutes each of the times that he had a State of the Union. Now, I don't know what the previous presidents did because I wasn't as aware. I don't have a memory of those. Probably could go look it up. But it seemed like it was a shorter speech. But of that 70 minutes, he spent 20 minutes talking about the Ukraine-Russia conflict or clownfic and the European Union and NATO, which are all interesting things, but they're not the State of the Union. They are the state of foreign affairs, which is different from the internal union. So his State of the Union speech was really only about 50 minutes, but that 50 minutes was filled with a bunch of plans for the future, which is not the current State of the Union. That would be the potential future State of the Union. And the potential future State of the Union has nothing to do with the current State of the Union. So he spent 20 minutes talking about nothing to do with the country, and then he spent 50 minutes talking about the fictionalized possible futures of what will happen next. At no point did we get any concrete understanding of what the current State of the Union is after Joe was in charge for a year. Now, I think we all know what the State of the Union is, but he in no way acknowledged that at all.
Yeah, and in the format of his speech being mostly about what he will do in the future for us if he remains in office is kind of the structure of a campaign speech, which is inappropriate for the State of the Union. So what he did promise also is of note because he basically stole Trump's platform. During the State of the Union, he said he wanted to fund the police when his party has been actively defunding the police, and his vice president was funding the terrorists who were killing police and terrorizing communities. He then said he wanted to get kids back in school. I mean, the only reason why they weren't in school is because your party were not letting them to go to school. And then he said he wanted to do an American First strategy without saying American First. He's saying he wanted to make sure that with his new infrastructure plan, that everything was bought American. All the materials that are being used to build our infrastructure were going to be American materials. And then he also even said, with a straight face, that he was going to tackle border security to better secure our borders. The guy who tore down all of the border security policies that Trump put in place and then let millions and millions of illegals come across the border, snuck them into other states with flights in the middle of the night without permission.
That's a story in a little bit here, but yeah, this is the State of the Union. A little bit of a spoiler alert. The State of the Union is that we have an additional 2.1 million illegal immigrants in this country now, thanks to Joe Biden. And approximately 750,000 of them got chartered, taxpayer-paid-for flights into the interior of the country, mostly to red states. Of that, several 100,000 of them were children, unaccompanied children that Joe just delivered to non-relatives. What the hell's going on there? Also, Triumvirate is pointing out, and how dare we miss it, is that, Joe Biden discussing the worth of a pound of Ukrainian people. That is obviously, and then every inch of Uruguay, which I don't remember that, but I believe it.
He also talked about the Iranian people.
Yes, either the Iranian or the Uranian people. I choose to believe that it's the Uranian people, and that he accidentally just let slip that the secret military space program, is actually in some kind of clown fic with the Iranians, probably over a dispute in the Martian lands. Though Dyer told me I was not allowed to talk about that on stream, or I would.
Dude, I just told you to not.
Yeah.
I told you that in confidence. Fucking hell, man.
If I have to tell all of you because he said he'd kill me because I know too much.
That might still happen. But I wouldn't openly call for an assassination. I'd just do it secretly.
Yeah, you're not Lindsey Graham.
Nice knowing you. So he seriously took on all of Trump's platform and pretended like he wasn't actively opposing all of those things for the last year. Why would we take you seriously? Why would anyone believe you that you would suddenly, just because you said so today, do the polar opposite of your previous year worth of policies?
And so that was that's been an interesting point brought up by a lot of commentators this week. And one of the key, I guess, questions that stuck out to me is, if you've got, let's say you've got a relative, everybody's got the kind of the crazy purple hair aunt type person in your family, right? Or you got a friend, to the extent that we've not polarized so far. Maybe this is a fantasy land where I'm imagining that you have some kind of liberal person that you've got a friendship with that is willing to talk to you, because those still exist. But what do you say to them when they say, well, Joe's trying to, secure the border. He's tough on crime. What are you talking about? You're just lying. I just watched him say that they're going to fund the police. Why are you telling me that the Democrats are anti-police? Why are you telling me that the Democrats are anti-border security? Joe Biden just said those things. And the question is very simple. Can you point to any policies that back up what Joe is saying? So Joe's saying that the Democrat Party, who he is the for better or worse, he's the leader of the Democrat Party right now. What he says is the Democrat Party platform. So if he's saying we have to fund the police, okay, can you point to one bill anywhere in the country at any level of government, even if it's a dog catcher? Can you point to any bill or policy that is pro-police coming from the Democrats right now? And you can't. Can you find any bill or policy at any level of government anywhere in the nation that is for border security or reducing the ability for illegal migrants to find a home here or to stay.
Or supported American businesses.
Yes. Can you find anything that is trying to be positive to small businesses? Can you find anything like that? And you just cannot find a single policy. Joe Biden can sit there and speak words all he wants. It will not materialize those things into policies. And if you're discussing this with somebody and they're saying, well, Joe Biden said, okay, great, Joe Biden said, is there any policies that are backing up what he says?
Actions speak louder than words.
And have they, since he said that, have there been any issued? And there's not been. There's not a single thing on the docket on the congressional legislation agenda for the next rest of his term. There's nothing on the agenda that's pro-police. There's nothing on the agenda that is trying to fix the border wall. He even went so far as to make a joke about the border wall because he thought it was funny that there is no border wall and that we're having a flood of immigration, which is just particularly cruel of him. But yeah, that's the question, is if he wants to, again, it's funny, right, Dyer? The parties must have switched again. Is that what's happening? Is the parties switched? Yeah, exactly. That's that great myth that the parties switched. They switched right after slavery ended, after the Civil War, because then it was, oh well, really the Democrats were, they were the ones fighting for freedom the whole time. It was those Republican plantation owners that they were, it was the parties switched, and then somehow the parties switched again in the late '60s for civil rights. So I guess they switched back to being, and
you're joking, like during the budget proposal for the bill that was passing the trillions of dollars for COVID money, the Democrats were actually arguing that because Republicans were refusing to vote for was it $4 trillion initially, $4 trillion bill, because of all the things that were in it that were not for police. But they're saying, well, there was also $200,000 or $200 million that could also be used for police. It's not directly for police; it's for communities, that they could use it for anything, but they could also use it for policing. Well, because they're saying no to this bill, they're the ones who are anti-police, that are defunding the police. They literally made that argument.
Yeah. And I mean, really what this State of the Union is it wasn't even a campaign stump speech. This was a speech reviewing all of the latest polls. And the latest polls say everyone, it doesn't matter what your party is, everyone is pissed about the border. Everyone, it doesn't matter what your party is, everyone is pissed about the anti-police and the just prolific crime, the extreme skyrocket, 100%, 200%, 300%, 900% in Chicago, increases in murders all over the country, just massive triple-digit increases in murder rates. People have had enough
pissed
of that.
over schools being locked down.
People are pissed about schools. People are pissed about children, what was happening with them. People are pissed about the gas prices. That this whole green agenda. All of a sudden, everybody's like, hey, wait a second, not in my tank. Gas is up 50% in the last year. In the last 2 weeks, it's gone up another 50%. And I think California, is in parts of California, they're starting to touch $6 a gallon. That's crazy.
Yep. So who was the speech for is a good question, right? Because the Democrats, hearing that Biden is pushing for funding the police, they were outraged. AOC had angry comments for Biden about his Trump era policies he says he wants to push. So his State of the Union speech pissed off the far left, and the right and center,
violence and chaos.
The center and the right don't believe him because his actions don't match his words. So who was this speech for? And I can only assume it's the low information, disengaged voter, which might not even have seen it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So you got the right, who knows that everything he's saying, like I just said, he has no policies that are backing that up. There are no Democrat policies backing up what he said, and that these are obviously stolen talking points from the right, not even from the Republican Party, just the populist right. And then you've got the left, who are extremely pissed that he would say that. Say fund the police. I mean, that's their sacred cow, basically. And then you've got the uninformed centrist who didn't watch it. They didn't watch it. yeah, who was this for? Well, this just kind of goes to show the strategy level of the Democrat Party, which is, well, I don't need to tell you what the level of Democrat strategy is, because just look at what they've been doing. They selected Joe for president. They selected Kamala for vice president. The quote-unquote person in waiting is Pete Buttigieg, who was completely MIA for 3 months last year during a major transportation crisis. So that is the level of strategy that the Democrat Party has, which is to say none. And so when they sit here and they craft the State of the Union speech, it has no impact on anything. It doesn't make any sense why they would do that, because their strategies, they have none.
Yeah. It is odd that all the problems he says he's going to solve are ones he created, right?
Yeah.
We have a video here. Have you pulled up the? Yeah, okay. Let's show them. This is from I believe it was Triumvirate. This is the Joe Biden clip of him talking about the pound of the value of the 1 pound of Ukrainian.
Yes.
It's unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run. And a pound of Ukrainian people, the proud, proud people, pound for pound, ready to fight with every inch of energy they have.
Well, you know, pound of Ukrainian people. It's worth energy. 2 Russian oligarchs in the hand.
I should probably turn my volume down.
Come on, man. It's worth 2 Burisma pipelines in the bush. That's where they are. It's the bushes. The bushes got him.
I didn't do a compilation, but he did have a lot of fumbles, and he was struggling through the entire speech. He can't even do 70 minutes where a large portion of it was applause lines.
Yes. And now I can't I probably should have looked this up beforehand. I'm bringing you a very secondhand story here, but Steven Crowder was able to notice something that I believe he was correct on. Every time there was a pause for applause, Joe Biden said a word. I can't remember what exactly the word was, but it like in the context of the speech, it kind of made sense. It just only sounded a little bit out of place. And what Crowder thinks is that was probably the applause line that was in the teleprompter, and Joe Biden regularly reads the stage directions out of the teleprompter. You know, sometimes it'll say, slow it down, or quote, or, something that are instructions to do something during the speech, some kind of hand motion. And Joe Biden will regularly read out the instructions on the teleprompter and not realizing, normally a normal person would read the teleprompter, and, you read ahead a little bit, and Dyer and I, like, we've got a little bit of stage instructions on our notes here too. And you read it, and you read ahead a little bit while your mouth is still speaking the previous sentence, because, we have brains that are not pudding. And normally you would read through that and you would realize, oh, this sentence has nothing to do with the context of what I'm speaking about. It's telling me to take a step to the left. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the Ukraine, so why would I read that? Obviously, it's a stage instruction. Joe Biden can't make that calculation on the fly, and so he regularly reads stage instructions. But what Crowder was pointing out is that the applause was very, very stage managed, just based off how many times Joe Biden repeated his stage instruction to basically wait for the applause.
There's also that funny moment where Nancy Pelosi being on screen for a long period of time is very distracting because she's constantly sucking on her dentures. But she also had made multiple attempts to talk to Kamala Harris behind Joe Biden during the speech.
Did she? I missed that.
She did. And even Kamala Harris was like, "Why are you trying to talk to me right now? We're on camera."
What's funny is Joe used to do that with when Obama was speaking. Joe would do that and try to talk to the whoever the what the hell's Nancy? Speaker of the House. Joe would try to talk to the Speaker of the House whenever he was vice president. I remember that, and they would always just be like, "Stop talking to me."
But Nancy Pelosi, when they started talking about burn pits and causing cancer to vets, she jumped up at the word vets, thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a applause line because we're talking about doing something for vets, right?" And
well, I mean, who doesn't get
hands together in an awkward, like giddy way?
Who doesn't get excited when you hear about the burn pits, Dyer? Come on.
I mean, they do really. They do it for me. They
get you going. I don't suppose you got a clip of that, do you?
I don't actually.
Come on, Dyer. Come on, man. Come on, man.
Maybe in between the different lines I have here, I can look at that video.
Why would you do that?
Exactly. Why would you not do that?
I'll try not to. So the portion of the speech that did actually apply to the union was a stump speech, like I said before. But not even
the State of the Future Union once Trump gets reelected.
Exactly. It is basically trying to justify why we should vote for him, and we're not going to. We got another clip here that I didn't really label very well, so let's see what it is.
Great. Actually, Triumvirate came through for us, and he's got Nancy being Nancy. Weird. Yeah. What is she doing? What is wrong with her lips? Jesus.
That's when they talk about burn pits.
Oh my God. Yeah.
God, why?
Oh my God. It's so I don't know. That's so creepy. I don't know. Is that some kind of greeting for the lizard people? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. Oh man, look at it. Look at her go. Look at her go. She just keeps doing it.
She's just so excited about cancer.
Yeah.
Cancerous vets.
Hey, I mean, who doesn't get excited about cancer? All right, what did I do with this
didn't
video?
Biden say he was going to cure cancer, like, entirely?
He did say that. I lost this video I just pulled up. There it is. I got Ted Cruz. He's looking sad. We're watching Dyer review Fox, review Biden. Great.
Now we got to have someone else review us.
Yes.
All right, let's watch this.
Waterways all across America, and we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice.
Yeah, there's climate
we'll
change.
Build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Begin to replace the poisonous lead pipes so every child, every American has clean water to drink at home and at school. We're going to provide affordable, high-speed internet for every American. Rural, suburban, urban, and tribal communities. 4,000 projects have already been announced. Many of you have announced them in your districts. And tonight, I'm announcing that this year, we will start fixing over 65,000 miles of highway and 1,500 bridges in disrepair. And folks,
yes, infrastructure spending is a very easy way and common way to launder money. Absolutely.
When we use taxpayers' dollars to rebuild America, we're going to do it by buying American. Buy American products. Support American jobs.
Buy American oil. Oh, wait.
The federal government spends about $600 billion a year to keep this country safe and secure. There's been a law on the books for almost a century to make sure taxpayers' dollars support American jobs and businesses. Every administration, Democrat and Republican, says they'll do it, but we're actually doing it. We'll buy America to make sure everything from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the steel on highway guardrails is made in America from beginning to end. All of it. All of it.
Okay. So I think it's kind of a negative that, first off, he's talking about what he's going to do. He's all these things he's going to give you if you continue to keep him in office and his party in office. But I think it's actually a negative to mention that there's so many streets and so many bridges that need to be repaired, since we are paying taxes into a fund to do that. He should be doing that anyways. That's not something that I think should be in the State of the Union, because that's something that should be getting done anyway, since we already have money allocated for that purpose. But they've been stealing that money that's supposed to go towards rebuilding our transportation system and using it for other purposes. So the fact that there's so much stuff in disrepair, it means that they've been poorly managing the money they have.
Well,
right?
and the thing that he left out is that the infrastructure bill when it speaks about infrastructure, specifically roads and bridges, what it has to say about it is absolute, well, it's clownfic. It talks about equity, that these bridges have literal structural racism in the materials that built them, and their architecture is racist, that their positioning is racist, the fact that they're black is racist. Like, that is a big thing that's been in the infrastructure bill. Pete Buttigieg, to the extent that he's done anything in his position as transportation secretary, he has been on the news 24/7 talking about how racist certain highways in certain cities are, that there's racism built into the bridges, that this is actually systemic racism in infrastructure. And so what are they going to do with the money that Joe Biden's trying to allocate for this? Well, they're going to, quote unquote, fix literal structural racism. Do you think that's going to in any way benefit you at all? Do you think that that's going to in any way reduce the number of potholes on your way to work? Do you think that that's going to make your bridge not collapse into a ravine like it did in Pittsburgh? Or do you think that maybe that is just going to be a bunch of money that creates a jobs program for gender and racial studies degrees coming out of colleges with subsidized loans?
And I know at least one iteration, not sure if the most recent iteration of the infrastructure bill included it, but they included pots of money and jobs for people that were determined by race and gender. So they're inherently racist and sexist policies being made into law, which kind of sounds like institutional racism and sexism to me.
Yes.
So Biden says he will rebuild America infrastructure by buying only American. This policy does not make sense as a hard and fast rule. Government should structure their policy to encourage the support of local production of key materials, the key materials that our government needs, our country needs to survive so it can be independent. That's a good thing. However, if domestic production cannot support the need, it doesn't make sense to require 100% of tax dollar money go towards only U.S. production.
Well, Dyer, what are some reasons that perhaps domestic manufacturing wouldn't be able to support the demand of domestic demand?
Because their policies have been intentionally strangling that kind of production. The COVID alone has shut down a bunch of factories.
Do you think maybe it takes a little bit of electricity to melt down all that steel? Maybe produce aluminum for those aircraft carrier decks? Do you think maybe that costs some electricity? Where does electricity come from?
Power plants.
Where do power plants come from?
Definitely not wind and sun, because that, as we've seen in Texas, is not reliable, and they aren't producing nuclear power plants. They decommissioned some, and they're trying to shut down coal plants, and they have shut down coal plants. So
as everyone knows, coal plants come out of the ground, and then they're piped from Canada to the U.S. That's where power plants come from. Did I misunderstand that?
Yes. So the point is, they have intentionally made energy more expensive. Energy being more expensive, but whether it be electrical or oil, it makes everything else more expensive. Government puts burdensome regulations on companies inside the states to make local production more costly, and so that to the point where it's cheaper to buy metal from China and it's shipped here. So the problem is, it doesn't make sense to force us to our limited tax dollars to be spent on more expensive material so you can have that road, right? Because that's a misuse of tax dollars. So it doesn't make sense to have that hard and fast rule. But if you really want to have local production, this is requiring you buy American is not how you do that. You better the conditions of having a business in America so it is profitable.
Well, and also you've got not just the energy issue, but also just the materials issue. So in the same way that it's more difficult to drill, mine, and explore for energy resources, it's also as difficult to drill, mine, and explore for other natural resources like ores and rare earth materials, which we have plenty of, a lot of which is in untapped Alaska up in the northwest up there. And it's you're a little bit wrong, Dyer. It's not about the burdensome regulations. That certainly drives up the price. But what Biden did was a step beyond, where he was just wholesale canceling land leases, canceling permits so that you couldn't do it at any price. It wasn't just that it was burdensome and expensive. It was that you were literally not able to do it at all. And you know, I think that there is some room for being careful with certain industries, but certainly you don't got to be so careful that you've completely eliminated the industry. I just don't see where is the electricity going to come from to smelt the steel that would be required for all of the US's demand. Because of Biden, we aren't going to be able to produce that much. Are we just going to keep buying oil from Russia, I guess, or Iran maybe, and shipping it over here and then crashing it in the harbor and dumping it in all over the seals? And then, you know, maybe if we're lucky, we'll get it over here into a power plant and burn it. And then we can produce steel that now cost 100, 200, 300% more than what it really needed to. That cost that goes into it has nothing to do with the regulations. It has everything to do with the fact that the energy took such a circuitous route to get here, because Joe Biden canceled all the energy exploration to get here domestically. And then the ores, well, we can't really mine for or explore for iron ore anymore because of all the regulations that have not just the regulations, but the canceled land leases and the inability to explore in places like Alaska. So we've also got to import all of that ore, and we imported all the energy to smelt it. Well, we might as well. Now it makes sense. Why don't you just let China do all of it? We'll just import Chinese steel.
It is both the burdensome regulation and that because it's a lot of different types of manufacturing we're discussing here. It's not just one size fits all. There's a variety of reasons, and if you wanted to address why any one material or one industry is why it's not profitable to do or not being permitted in the States, you have to go to each one and look at the specific situation and what government hurdles have been put in place.
Well, yeah, and it's just obviously it's a whole economy. It's a giant machine. It's a mechanical device as the whole economy. And the Democrats have essentially poured concrete onto it, and then Joe Biden's highlighting this one little gearbox here and saying, "Oh, look, I'm going to get this one to spin." It's like, okay, but you poured concrete on the rest of the economy, and we can't support it spinning anymore. You just have to wholesale remove and lift the regulations and the restrictions and the canceled land leases at this point.
Saying if you'll only buy American without fixing the underlying problems
will make it worse.
Will actually be a bad thing. That's the thing. Like, if we had a good industry and a good market, then that would make sense. But it doesn't now. So supporting domestic production is of the national and public interest. It is a security interest to make sure that we are independent and able to supply ourselves with what we need to survive. However, requiring that we buy more expensive things and thus having our tax dollars not be able to go as far as they could otherwise is not being a good steward of our taxpayer money.
Well, also, what are we going to do? So you want to build a carrier out of American-made steel. Okay, so they're going to have to buy American-made steel. Well, we don't have the capacity to really support that. So what's that mean? There's going to now be a shortage of steel. And so that's going to drive up the price. So the government will then pay even more for it, which is fine. They can just keep taxing you or inflating your savings account until it's worthless. But then what happens to you? Oh, well, you want to buy a house? You can't. The steel's too expensive, or it's gone. Oh, you want to get a small office building for your small business? Well, you can't because steel's too expensive. Oh, you want to buy some equipment for your factory? You can't. Steel's too expensive. Why is steel too expensive? Well, because the government bought all of it with your tax dollars and put it into a fucking carrier that the Navy's going to crash into another carrier.
Yeah,
because they're too busy learning gender study stuff. So that's what's going to happen. This will actually end up being something that drives inflation. If the government's going to be buying up all of the products here domestically, it's actually going to drive inflation. And that's because, as you pointed out, Dyer, because the rest of the economy is not moving correctly due to their regulations. It's a whole holistic approach. If the economy was functioning correctly, it would be fine if the government would step in and want to buy up more, because supply and demand, the market, the invisible hand of the market, would adapt. It would meet the new demand by generating more supply. But if you've increased the demand and then you've told them, well, you're not allowed to supply anymore because we're not going to allow you to have the energy to do it, or we're not going to allow you to have the ore to do it, or we're going to make it prohibitively expensive to get those things, well, then supply can't jump up to meet demand, which means price will have to jump up to meet demand. All Joe Biden has done right now is promise you that he will create the biggest inflation bubble that he possibly can, using your tax dollars to do it.
Yeah, and the thing is, in that nightmare scenario where you have the prices going up for steel, just as an example, but it could be anything because there's a lot of materials that are required, because of the government creating this high demand that the supply, then they're going to start making factories to produce more steel, and they're going to build up this industry completely based around trying to meet the local requirements of this of the population and the government requiring these supplies. But then these government contracts are temporary. The money is temporary. So this industry has been built up to meet this heightened demand from just the U.S. government that then will go away, and then all that money, all those jobs, those factories will no longer be required, because now they have a product that's far too expensive to be viable internationally.
And who's going to be running those factories? You're not making a carrier deck at the local steel mill. No, you're going to have Big Steel do that. And who's Big Steel owned by? Probably China. We don't have any restrictions on foreign entities owning big companies. So Joe Biden can say that he wants to buy all American all he wants, but if he's buying all American from American companies that are puppeted by foreign interests, as most of them are because of the way we have our essentially zero regulations on foreign investment, well, that's not going to help us either, is it?
Nope, not one bit. So moving on, Biden says he's going to ensure the VA covers veterans with cancer related to their service.
Or cancer unrelated to their service.
He then got heckled by Lauren Boebert. Let's watch that video.
I don't know that he was heckled so much as a friendly reminder that he forgot something.
Yeah.
These burn pits that incinerate waste, the waste of war, medical and hazardous material, jet fuel, and so much more.
She's doing it.
And they come home, many of the world's fittest and best trained warriors in the world. Never the same. Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those.
So let me try and boost the audio here. So you can hear Lauren Boebert in the background there. She yelled 13 of them that were in flag-draped coffins. Who were the 13?
The 13 that were killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan during the botched withdrawal.
Oh, who botched that withdrawal?
Biden.
Oh, well, that's okay, because Joe Biden knows the pain of those families, as he's about to explain.
Oh, he also, by the way, don't worry, he got back at the terrorists for blowing up our 13 soldiers by,
blowing up 13 random children
with a drone.
Oh,
so, yeah, that definitely doesn't mean he's incompetent in multiple ways.
One of those soldiers was my son, Major Bo Biden. I don't know for sure if the burn pit that he lived near, that his hooch was near, in Iraq.
Okay, Dyer, there's been a lot of debate about this. I don't think I'm giving away anything. You've been deployed before.
Yep.
What is in the context of a deployment, what is a hooch?
It's just the place you're housed at.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a proper term.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up, because I think I didn't know that. A lot of people were very confused as to what the hell a hooch was.
I didn't know that was not commonly known. Yeah, that's what they refer to the.
Okay, so Joe Biden has done this before. The number of times that Joe Biden says words that are not real is uncountable. However, sometimes he does say slang that does actually have meaning in a very narrow context to a very small number of people. And so sometimes, just because we're so experienced with him saying a word that doesn't exist and just saying like, oh, there goes Joe again, not every time he says a word that you don't know is a made-up word. So I guess hooch, and I just learned this just now with all of you guys, that one apparently is a real term, and he did not make that one up. I am remembering a previous time when he was talking about clipping coupons in the stock market. Everybody was making fun of that, but I actually have a finance background, and in the context of coupon bonds in the stock market, it was a funny joke to people who have finance degrees and to no one else. And a lot of people ripped him apart for that because they didn't understand it. And all you've told me is that you don't have a finance degree, which is fine. But it was funny. So 2 examples of him saying something that most people don't understand, but they were really actually a real thing. And that is juxtaposed against the 1,000 times that he has just set up made up words or, randomly insulted people for, weird things.
Yeah, it's kind of an old slang word that the military held on to, and he has military kids, so I'm assuming that's where he picked it up.
All right, well, we'll let him have that perhaps Beau Biden lived in a hooch, though I believe that the consensus is that Beau Biden's service record does not indicate that he was ever living in a place where there was a burn pit at.
Right. So all this said, I don't believe for a second that a burn pit caused his brain cancer, because that's not how that works.
Do you guys pour jet fuel into burn pits just to light it on fire? Like how you guys stay warm in the winter?
I don't think we're going to waste the jet fuel for that.
What's the acronym for jet fuel?
Nothing.
Is it longer than just saying jet fuel?
No, I'm just not saying because I want to. I'm doubting that I have the acronym correctly. I don't want to say it wrong because we are being recorded. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
I heard. Okay, so we'll keep going on this, but so just to, I know we keep interrupting this, but to bring up the context again is Joe Biden is talking about ending cancer, and then he jumps into the VA and how a lot of veterans get cancers and they get weird cancers, which is true. And I brought this up at the time on Tuesday. The military is a pretty toxic environment. There's a lot of chemicals and weird things and aliens and all that sort of stuff. All of it can give you cancer. And unfortunately, there is a very high incidence of cancer in veterans. And we should definitely do something about that. However, one of the things that also kills soldiers before they become veterans is idiotic leadership like Joe's. And so it was absolutely correct of Lauren Boebert, who I actually guessed that it was her before we knew for sure. Lauren Boebert to call out that there was 13 flag-draped coffins that Joe Biden had a very specific hand in causing. He specifically caused that because of his own vanity of wanting to be the president that removed the troops from Afghanistan. And he even was so vain as to try to line it up with September 11th as if that symbology had any kind of meaning to anybody other than it just being a round number of years that we were in Afghanistan. So he has this vanity project of trying to remove the troops just to say that he did it, but he doesn't have any plan of executing it in a safe, efficient, or reasonable manner. And it got 13 servicemen killed. And he didn't bring that up. The Afghanistan is the biggest conflict that the U.S. has been involved in a generation. 13 servicemen dying in a day is the biggest death toll in a decade, if not longer. And it all happened under Joe Biden's watch. I would think that that's a significant thing to talk about. And he didn't. He didn't talk about it at all. And so Boebert reminded him, hey, there's 13 flag-draped coffins that you forgot to mention.
Well, you heard what Jen Psaki said about that, right? There just wasn't enough time.
Oh, yes. So that was, that was the response was, as I said, a lot of other people pointed out that, hey,
those 13 men dying, those 13 servicemen dying was that's pretty significant, just kind of given the context of how big of a war it was and how long we were there. A lot of those servicemen weren't even born when we went there. A lot of them were under 20. So, it was significant. And when Jen Psaki was asked, hey, why did we not bring up this significant event? And Afghanistan wasn't brought up at all. You'll remember that we were all told that Afghanistan was the biggest policy success in history. And to speak out against Afghanistan as anything other than a full success was literally treasonous, to the point where they attempted to dishonorably discharge Scheller, Marine Scheller. I can't remember what his full rank and his first name was. Because he said, hey, we did this bad and somebody should take responsibility for it. He was discharged for that. So it was borderline treasonous to speak out against Afghanistan because it was such a success. And yet, in that success, Joe Biden didn't bring it up once during the State of the Union. And he didn't bring up the 13 servicemen that got killed as a result of it. And when asked about it, Jen Psaki said, well, there just isn't enough time in the State of the Union address to get to all of the things that are important to us. And of the things that are important, I would say that that's pretty high, but also that the idea that there isn't enough time, what did I just tell you a little bit ago and that night, is this was a very short State of the Union. There was plenty of time to expand it. Nobody was hurrying him off the stage, other than probably his party. But he could have kept going. Trump regularly went for 90 minutes on his State of the Union. So there was plenty of time for him.
There's no time limit on these things.
But again, So let's keep that in mind for continuing out this clip. They didn't have enough time to bring up the 13 servicemen that Joe Biden got killed 6 months ago, yet Joe Biden had time to bring up this.
I also want to point out, sorry.
Oh, come on, Dyer.
The clip's basically over anyways. It's important to me that Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller gets the respect for his rank and his full name.
That's fair. But Joe Biden didn't have enough time to bring up them, but he's got time to talk about Beau Biden here in the rest of this clip.
In Kosovo is the cause of his brain cancer, the disease of so many other troops. But I am committed to find out everything we can.
Yeah, so that was Joe talking again about Beau Biden dying of brain cancer, which was completely unrelated to his service record. And Joe's also brought that up before at awkward times, and it's very weird and strange.
He also was using that to talk about how he was going to work with the VA to make sure that cancer that was discovered during or that came from someone's service was treated, as though that was the major problem with the VA, was that soldiers, airmen, and Marines were getting cancer and it wasn't being treated, and that's not the case. Like maybe there's some situations where some veterans couldn't show that they were involved in some sort of service that brought them close to something that would have caused cancer, but I haven't seen many problems like that, and all it would require is for them to designate a certain thing as being a cause for cancer. Like if you have in your medical records that you were deployed to a location where you know they use burn pits, that's already a known situation. Or if you were exposed to aircraft radar, or if you were exposed to certain chemicals throughout your career, if that's in your career history, then they know that if you get cancer down the road, that the VA is supposed to cover it.
Yeah, so, and the real problem with the VA is not the things that they don't cover; it's the wait times that. It's not a joke. People are literally killing themselves waiting in line for the VA because it is such an inefficient and corrupt organization.
Yeah. So it's not like it isn't a problem that some people don't have it in their records that they were exposed to something cancerous. It is a problem, but if you're trying to look at the VA as a whole and identify what are the major problems, that's not it. The problems are that it's too bureaucratic. There's too much process involved that's not focused on just helping the patient. There's way too many limitations to providers that cause the limitation of services and the long wait times is because they don't have enough doctors or enough specialists to actually take care of the population of veterans they have. So it's a great deal for them. Oh, yeah, we'll cover all of your sicknesses. Oh, I'm sorry, we just have no one who can actually do it for you, so they end up not having to pay for it, and the person just dies, and no longer is the government's problem anymore because we just didn't have enough providers. It's a great deal for the government to not actually pay out their benefits. And then another problem is the treatment. It's the long wait times, the limitations of providers, and the bureaucracy, all things that Biden could fix, real problems he could fix, but he chooses to focus on the smallest of non-problems.
Also, no Badacath care. I mean, Dyer, when you're retired, you're going to have a Badacath that's uncared for because the VA just refuses to acknowledge it.
While in the service, I asked my primary care provider if I could have some Badacath, and he didn't care.
Wow, that's just true and honest shaman pressure.
Yeah. So also he uses his son's death as a political tool, which I just find personally grotesque.
Yeah. So in the context of this as well, so skipping the bringing up of the 13 dead service members that he got killed, he brings up Beau Biden, who died of things unrelated to his service record. We also remember back at the time when those servicemen died, the families were very distraught that during the meeting with the president, he continued to talk about Beau Biden to the point where it angered and upset a lot of the families that they thought that this was going to be about their kids' sacrifice, their relative sacrifice and their service to the country. And Joe just spent the whole time going on and on about Beau Biden, and really no nice way to put this, no soft way to put this. Lying about how Beau died and trying to conflate that his death had something to do with serving the country when it was just cancer. And that's tragic, but there's a big difference between dying in a military operation serving your country and getting cancer from an unrelated source and just dying.
There's a big difference between dying from natural causes, essentially, and dying because of the inept leadership and failure of your leadership. That's like dying because they gave you an unwinnable situation and put you in danger unnecessarily. That is very different from dying from natural causes.
Yeah, so it's inappropriate is the best way to put it, but it's gross and strange and very self-serving for Joe to continue to say that over and over and over again. And what we really do know about Beau Biden is probably daring, but definitely after his military service, he was right there alongside Hunter and the rest of Joe's family, working with Sinohawk, working with these corrupt Chinese energy deals, working all over Europe, pulling in money for the Biden family. Beau Biden was as bad as Hunter was so far as legal concerns go. It's just Hunter has a lot more vices than Beau did, apparently. But Beau, make no mistake, just because he's dead doesn't mean he didn't do these things. We found out a lot of stuff about Beau through the emails and these investigations of these various shell companies the Bidens have been setting up. So Beau was right there alongside them, doing all that stuff. So I'm sure he served as honorably as he could as a soldier, but he certainly wasn't serving the American people for the time that he wasn't in the service.
Another thing that Biden said during the State of the Union was he seriously said that he was going to go and work with the Federal Reserve Bank to fight inflation, which is hilarious. Because here's what the Federal Reserve actually does. It's responsible for setting interest rates, for printing money, and then as of recently, it's also been responsible for investing that money into the stock market. And it also loans that money that they just printed to governments and banks, aka the Federal Reserve is principally responsible for all inflation. If the Federal Reserve was to do anything to stop inflation, it could stop inflation right now. It couldn't reverse it, but it could stop it right now by simply ceasing to exist. So I can only assume that Biden saying he's going to fight inflation by working with the Federal Reserve means that Biden plans on ending the Federal Reserve.
Yes. That would be the ideal solution, though I seem to doubt it. And we know how Biden thinks inflation works, right? We have that lovely clip from last summer where he's with Don Lemon.
So us buying stuff is what causes inflation.
What's that? Oh, yes. Well, we know a couple of different ways that he thinks inflation works, but we know in one instance he said that the $6 trillion Build Back Better, or the $1 trillion Build Back Better plan, that spending that much money would actually reduce inflation. He said it 3 times so that you knew that he wasn't lying, or maybe you knew that he was lying because he said it 3 times. But Joe Biden thinks that spending money reduces inflation. He also thinks that you buying a used car causes inflation in the price of milk and eggs.
It makes no sense. I'm not even sure how to argue against that. It's just that's not how the reality works.
Yeah. And then he also daring this particular State of the Union speech and many times before that in various other addresses, he has stated that he thinks that the meat industry and the grocery store chains have colluded to price fix, which is just completely out of left field, completely untrue. The idea that the meat companies are just the only reason why beef prices are going up is because the meat industry is price fixing. Oh yeah, really? Can you point to me where they're price fixing at and where their cost of the cattle that they're purchasing are not going up as well?
That's an accusation of a crime.
It is.
You have them investigated if you really think that's happening.
Exactly. You actually had who's the Pocahontas? What the hell's her name? Elizabeth Warren, calling out Kroger's directly, saying Kroger's was price fixing milk and eggs, and that's why the prices were going up.
Could it possibly because COVID policies required them to shut down production lines and resulted in the dumping of a bunch of milk and the bunch of food getting rotted?
It's possible. Well, what's interesting too is that there's a good chance some of you listening right now might never have heard of Kroger's, or of Kroger's, but that you don't have one anywhere near you, because Kroger services a relatively narrow band of the United States. It doesn't extend to the whole United States. So if this one grocery chain that is in flyover America with lowest population density is raising prices, even though the places where there's Kroger's there's always going to be another type of grocery chain. How is Kroger's price fixing eggs causing inflation in places where Kroger's doesn't exist at? Are there Kroger's in New York? Spoiler alert, there's not. So is Kroger's the reason why food prices are so expensive in New York? I'm going to guess not. So you have all of these examples of Joe Biden specifically and the Democrat Party generally identifying what they think inflation is caused by and how they think they can stop inflation. And it's all absolutely 100% dead wrong. In fact, it's the precise opposite of whatever they're saying about it.
Yeah. I've also never seen a Kroger's, but hear about them all the time.
Isn't it crazy that you've never seen a Kroger's, yet it's the reason why everything in your life is more expensive?
They must be powerful.
Like when you bought a new minivan last year, it was actually more expensive because Kroger's was price fixing my eggs. Did you know that, Dyer?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And when I was trying to buy a house last year, and the housing prices had inflated by 30%, and the money that I had saved wasn't worth as much anymore, it was very frustrating. I didn't realize at the time, thank God for Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, I didn't realize that was entirely due to Kroger's price fixing milk, and then also probably you buying a used minivan. Did you know that you buying a used minivan that caused the price of my house to go up?
I think you may have just doxed the first time the vehicle I drive. I bet they all thought I don't know, rode a fucking rocket or something.
Everyone knows you've got a family. Everybody's got multiple cars these days.
I'm kidding, not literally doxed. Like I wonder. But yeah, my vehicle choice that's what caused inflation. It wasn't how many trillions was it again?
6? Almost 7 trillion now.
Okay, yeah, it was not the printing of $7 trillion, which was then lent against for fractional banking to be like...
Yeah, to lever... Yeah, the way fractional reserve banking is you got to multiply it by 20. So you multiply $7 trillion by 20, and that's the number of new dollars flowing through the economy.
That's all my fault.
Yes, that's Dyer's fault because he bought a fucking minivan. I can't, you basically owe me...
Mea culpa.
Yeah, you owe me 30% of my house value because it's really your fault. And then also
did your house go up in value?
I don't know.
Since you bought it?
Probably. No, because the housing prices stole.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, look what. Yeah, the price, the assets are only moving around whenever it's inconvenient for us.
Yeah, jeez. So supposedly, also mass mandates, as you mentioned before, they just magically evaporated.
Well, the science
before the
changed,
Soviet Union.
Dyer.
Okay, but they didn't. The science didn't change.
Oh, it didn't change. Oh, well.
Yeah,
that's
the
rough.
same science said that they were ineffective existed like 1 month into the pandemic.
Yeah, but it was inconvenient, and we didn't like it back then.
It was misinformation back then, but now it's the truth.
Well, yeah, but misinformation. Also, it's like a tree. Like you have to water it and let it grow for 18 months, and then it becomes information. Like everything that's information now was misinformation 18 months ago.
Yeah, but people got canceled and demonized for believing the truth back then.
Details, Dyer. I mean, come on. It's not like it's the end of the free world or anything.
Right. So supposedly, 78% of the 27 million people who watched the State of the Union approved of his speech. I don't believe that for a second, but that was reported. But
how many percent?
It's 78%.
Oh wow! The other 22% must have had a gun to their head.
Yeah. So the Trump's first State of the Union garnered 45 million views. Obama's first garnered 48 million. That is quite a bit higher. So Biden's had the lowest viewership in a very long time. And with how our population has grown in the last 30 years, the fact that it's this far lower is really a statement.
Yeah, I'm guessing that was probably the Nielsen rankings, which the Nielsen rankings was very narrow in what they were counting as views. Joe Biden was watched kind of a meta viewing, as the way you guys who watched with me on Tuesday, as kind of a meta viewing of Joe. We were watching it, but we weren't counted as part of the Nielsen rankings. And Crowder had I think 1.2 million people watching. There was a lot of other streams that were watch-alongs that had a lot of stuff, a lot of people on. But a lot of people who are watching online, they're more likely going to be not in support of what Biden was saying. Like if you're watching Crowder, you can be guaranteed that the 1.1 million people watching Crowder who are also watching Biden with him, that they're probably going to be not in support of Joe. And so like just that alone would have changed the percentage on these Nielsen rankings. So if you start adding in the rest of the streams like that, all of a sudden these Nielsen rankings are pretty much useless.
Yeah, so I agree with you. But they are pitching this number of 78% as saying this is an example of how Biden's speech was actually really well received. And my point is that the amount they're counting, the 27 million, is extremely biased apportionment to get their surveys from. Because, like you said, the new media, the new way people are viewing things, the easiest way people are viewing things is through watching other platforms that weren't counted. And those people that tend to watch those other platforms tend to be on the right, and the people who are still clinging on to those old news agencies for their news to watch the State of the Union, they tend to be the far left because they're the ones that haven't turned off CNN yet after all their lies. So of the people who watch CNN, CBS, and all those left-wing services, 78% of them approved of Biden's speech.
Triumvirate seems to have found me. I'll find you first. All right. Okay. So, do you have anything else on that?
No, that was it.
All right. Well, that was the Dyer's State of Fox's State of the Union review.
I give you 8.5.
And I give you a 7.5 because.
What? I want to recount.
No, you got my 8.5, but then you got one subtracted because you weren't there.
All right.
It was like the group project. All right. Our next story is about this little place. It's a nice little place in Europe. Some of you guys may have heard about it.
I want to visit. It's a good vacation spot.
Yeah, it's it's beautiful this time of year. It's a place called the Ukraine. Ukraine.
It must be an important place because Biden gave a lot of his time for the State of the Union to this location, which I guess is an American territory.
I'm not saying that the guy in this picture looks like you, Dyer, but I mean,
stop doxing me.
Dyer is not in the Ukraine fighting Russians with a cardboard rifle, guys. Any allegations of that are false. They're not true. It's not a secret channel in the Discord where he's explaining what he's, posting pictures of his exploits there. It's just not happening, guys. Stop spreading that rumor. It's false.
Stop assuming these things. Misinformation, you'll get canceled. Also, is it no wonder that they're really struggling, these Ukrainians? They're trying to fight an entire war with just cardboard guns.
Yeah. And also dummies, which, by the way,
dummies,
that was the one, the guy on the left there. That's who I think looks like you. But
well, thanks. Yeah. Fuck you. So, moving on. Hey, I want to give it. This is actually a question that was spurred on by Fox asking me a question about the state of mind of Putin.
Yeah. So you want me to ask that question, then you can kind of.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that the aspirations in the last century of the Nazi Party and the German regime, well, I don't agree with it. I think that it was understandable. Not like I empathize with the position that they had, but they explained why they were conquering the area and what they were doing, and I understood what they were trying to do and why they were doing it. I understood what their motivations were. There was a clear link between what they were doing and what their motivations were. I could see the logical connection. Now, I didn't agree with their premise, but I can understand what they were doing based off their motivations. Similar thing in China with a lot of the communist revolutions all over the world. And I can understand those things. Again, not that I'm accepting them or agreeing with the premise. I just can logically understand that they had a motivation and they did XYZ thing to accomplish that motivation. With Putin, I think this is just I'm not as familiar with foreign issues and geopolitics and things of that nature. And I didn't really understand what it was that is Putin's goal. Is there a group of people that he doesn't like? Does he think that the Russian blood is the Übermensch and that they're the superior race? Does he want to institute communism worldwide? What is it that's Putin's motivation? I generally understand that he's a bad guy, he's an evil person, and these sorts of things. But what is the purpose? In his view, what is his motivation in doing what he's doing? And it didn't really make sense to me, or I wasn't able to kind of figure it out on my own. And so I asked Dyer that, and this whole segment is kind of his response to that.
Yeah. So what the question you asked is a very wise question, and every leader needs to ask those kinds of questions about their adversaries, not because you empathize with them, but because you don't know how to defeat your enemy until you understand why they're doing what they're doing, because it may make it far easier to predict their next moves. So that's why San Tzu says you should know your enemy like you know yourself, right? So in the mind of Putin, I've done a lot of research on Soviet Russia, Putin, and Russian politics, just because of it is a related topic to what I do, right? I'm not at all like a history buff who knows everything. I just know enough to understand my adversary. So he wishes to return Russia to its former greatness, to the Soviet Union. Russia and Putin viewed the loss of the Soviet territories and the considerable amount of wealth and resources in those territories the same way that the North viewed the secession of the southern states, as it was a betrayal, and that they couldn't let those countries leave them because they felt ownership of those other states being part of the Union. Now, I know there's a very vastly different moral reason behind those conflicts, but why this seceded in both cases. But in the different states of the Soviet Union all had their reasons, but the effect was the same. Them leaving was a betrayal that stole from Putin's Soviet Russia and took away the power plants and the oil and the raw materials that like. Ukraine is very wealthy.
Yeah, so I do know this context is that Ukraine has a lot of natural resources. They have a lot of industrial capacity, and they also have a lot of very rich farmland. They're called the breadbasket of Europe because they have so much good farmland. And so obviously Russia being mostly frozen wasteland, food's very important to them. And so I now I understand from what Dyer's explaining, that is a big piece of the Russian economy that just got lopped off. As we had with our civil war, there was a very specific positions for or locations for our industrial centers. They weren't evenly spread out throughout the United States. When we split, there was farming capacity that was in one region, and there was industrial capacity that was in another region. And when there was a split, those became very imbalanced for the two pieces that were left. So Putin's looking at his very unbalanced economy now for the last 30 years. And Ukraine also has an unbalanced economy. They've never been able to really recover from that. And, the corruption there doesn't help. But just from from a position of, nationalism, being Russian, being Soviet Union. I don't know. What is a Soviet Union denizen called? A Soviet? Yeah. A Soviet. Being a Soviet, being a Russian.
A comrade.
And even those of you guys listening to this show probably have a lot more sense of nationalism than the average American does, unfortunately. But even for us, I think that the understanding the type of nationalism that Putin probably has is a little bit beyond our understanding, just because our nationalism has been so demonized and watered down. Even those of us that claim to be probably aren't able to experience it at the level that Putin probably is.
Yeah, and there's also the problem that the 15 countries that broke up from the Soviet Union, they are very interconnected. They depended on each other for resources. The new borders that separated them separated families and communities and shared cultures and resources, much like the separation of the North and the South separated brothers from brothers and separated families.
Just like the Soviet Union separated the German people in Berlin. Oh no. Well.
Right. So these were not a clean break. They had so much. There are people in Ukraine who have family members in Russia and vice versa.
Yeah, but there's not like restrictions to an absurd degree up until now on them visiting each other. Like
no.
There was visa programs.
They feel
there was
like
the roads
they're still the same.
Yeah, the roads were still there. It wasn't as big of a deal to the people living there, I don't think, as it was to the leaders of the country.
Yeah. The difference being is that it was not seen as a betrayal from within. So the Soviets didn't see it as only a betrayal from within, like I would say that the North and the South would have seen it. They saw it as being born from foreign influence. Western politicians and media, for instance, informed the world of the suffering caused by communism. For example, they also highlighted how the Soviets were hiding from the Ukrainian people the meltdown in Chernobyl and the dangers posed to the local people. Chernobyl melted down on 26 April 1986. And Gorbachev issued his first official public statement on 14 May of that year, over 2 weeks later. And during that speech, he said that the worries about Chernobyl were only a campaign of malicious lies from the West. That lie and the hiding of what was happening to the Ukrainian people where Chernobyl was located at, was one of the main factors for why Ukraine ended up leaving the Soviet Union, because it was so obvious that the Soviet leadership were going to let people die from what was 400 times the fallout from Hiroshima.
Thank God that was the last time a major world superpower lied about a dangerous contaminant escaping and contaminating the whole world. Thank God that was the last time that ever happened.
China. So they blamed the West for indoctrinating the Ukrainians and other countries into viewing the Soviets as being evil and willing to sacrifice them for.
How dare the West
gain.
point out to the Ukrainians that the government lied to them about getting radiation poisoning?
But you gotta understand, this is the myth of their origins, right? Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. It's definitely wrong. It's not true. Us telling them, hey, you're irradiating your citizens, you should probably stop that, because you're also irradiating our countries too. That wasn't Western propaganda. It was the truth. But they view it as an attack where the West came in and propagandized their people and convinced them to leave and take that land and wealth with them.
And I think that's important to explain, to dig into a little bit more, is the idea that it doesn't have to be a true fact for it to be Putin's motivation. It doesn't even matter if he really believes it himself. It's what's motivating him. And there's been such a demonization, cries of treason for anybody to even point out any kind of motivation that Putin might have, because it's seen as justifying it and empathizing with it, when, as I just went through great lengths to explain, it's not empathy. It's just, you've got to understand your enemy and what motivates him, the way Dyer just explained. Otherwise, you'll never be able to defeat him. And as you can see, the policy of demonizing anyone who is trying to explain or rationalize Putin's position being met with calls of treason, well, we can see how well that is serving us as a nation and serving our leaders as tactics, when we're constantly doing exactly the wrong thing in response to Putin and continuing to motivate and drive him to be more and more extreme every day of this war.
It's the failure of understanding the motives of the populace that led to us trying to do nation building and us going into Afghanistan with no actual win scenario, and then wasting lives, treasure, and time on not a mission based on a false assumption of our adversary. Right?
Well, and that false assumption, to be specific, the false assumption about our adversary is that he has Western values.
Right.
And he does not. Is this my part to read? Is that why you keep highlighting it furiously? Putin was a member of the KGB and witnessed the fall and the embarrassment of the Soviet Union, which he blamed on the West and traitors. 20 years ago, when Putin became the president of Russia, after having a puppet be installed as president, then
I originally put the dictator-in-chief, but I didn't want to trip you up.
Do you know the story about how he became president? So he installed a previous president, and that previous president passed a law that said that there was no term limits, and then Putin ran in the next election and won, and he's like, well, I wasn't the one who instituted no term limits. This other guy did, so it's okay.
Very clever there.
Now I'm just
very clever.
President forever. And so he became president of Russia, openly stating his goal that he was going to rebuild the Soviet Union. This was just 10 years after the Soviet Union fell, and the president of Russia was stating that it was his intention to rebuild the Soviet Union, which would require the invading or securing political power over the 14 countries that had been split off the Soviet Union after its collapse.
Right. This has been Putin's life mission for half of his life. It's part of the Russian origin myth that he has preached to his followers. If you watch his speeches, you'll see it as a reoccurring theme. Just like in the same way that Hitler had his own origin myth that he used to justify his deeds. That was a through line of all of his speeches. So Putin either believes or wants Russians to believe that the previous Soviet territories were taken away against the will of the people, and the Russians in those states are essentially victims who want to rejoin Russia. In some cases, he's created the myth that they are being persecuted while they're there.
Now, that is verifiable. What Dyer just said is verifiable. What's not been verifiable, but is also information that's floating around, is that over the last week, Russian troops that have been captured, and they're... it's 2022, guys. Their smartphones that have also been captured alongside them have information in them that indicates that these Russian soldiers
regret their decision to invade Ukraine, that they were lied to and told that the Ukrainian people were oppressed and that they would welcome the Russians as liberators, which is language very reminiscent to what we told our military when we went into the Middle East. But none of that has been verified. A lot of that is propaganda. I know that there was a Ukrainian diplomat reading out text messages of a supposed Russian soldier telling his mom how sad he was that he was killing civilians and that he was being told to do this and that they had lied to him, that Ukraine wasn't actually oppressed. And so you've had stuff like that where completely unverifiable things being read out on the floor of the UN, clearly propaganda, clearly not true things. There was statements made by Russian POWs that, again, they were crying for their mothers, that they regretted the invasion, that they, were told all these lies about the Ukrainian people, and now they're recanting and they're so sorry. And we don't, this is fog of war, and so much of these stories have been completely false. So what Dyer said is correct, that the Putin believes and has said multiple times that he believes the Ukrainian people are oppressed. What we don't know for sure is what the motivation of the soldiers is. It might be, but we don't know that for sure. So if you're seeing this information come out of like, oh, there's these recordings of these Russian POWs, or
be skeptical.
Yeah, they found this guy's cell phone and somehow it stayed on and logged in even though he was dead on the road for 6 hours, and it just happened to have the text message up to his mom. Be as skeptical as possible. And along with that skepticism, this whole week, the last 7 days, I've been completely vindicated for my show on Sunday. 2 weeks ago, every commentator was giving you guys the Ghost of Kiev, the battle at Snake Island, all of these crazy stories about these Russian war heroes and Russia, or these Ukrainian war heroes, and they were beating back Putin, and Putin's forces were essentially faltering because they didn't realize the Ukrainian people were pushing back so hard, and all of this propaganda. And I said last Sunday, I can't bring you guys these stories as if they're true. I know everyone else is. I know all these channels that have, 10 million subscribers, and they're all telling you this stuff, so it must be true, right? And I said I couldn't do that, and I told you I didn't even know what to talk to you guys about on Sunday because everything was so unverifiable. And then what happened? What happened this week? Well, you guys, what happened? Oh, the Ghost of Kiev. Completely made up. Oh, the battle at Snake Island, mostly made up. This Russian mother texting her dead soldier son, probably made up. So you had so many stories this week that were proven to be false. And so I just want you guys to remember that this channel did not oversell what was happening, while all of your other favorite commentators definitely were, and they spent all of last week either apologizing for that or just completely ignoring that they had done it. And so we need to continue that skepticism this week and the next week and for the remainder of this war, because the propaganda is out in full force, and really the only thing that you can rely on is stuff that we knew were motivations before the war started. But if you guys are trying to figure out what the motivations are based off of recordings of Russian POWs, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Everything coming out right now is from both sides is propaganda, and until it's verified with evidence that you can review yourself, assume it all just to be lies meant to win hearts and minds so they can get money and support.
Yeah.
Now, the stuff that we're providing you here is all stuff that's available in speeches and history books on the topic of the breakup of the Soviet Union and the news clips from back then, and Putin's own speeches are a wealth of knowledge into what Putin, at least what he is telling his people to believe.
Yeah. Now, Putin does have the support for his belief in the myth. Whether or not it's real or not, he is acting as though he believes it. When he invaded Crimea, Russian forces were welcomed with very little fight. The same thing happened in the two regions of Georgia, where he invaded and set up Russian loyalist states. You'll remember those happening under the Obama administration. He supported the independence of a state declaration by an extreme minority of the population, which then ethnically cleansed the Georgians in their region. Great. So
yes,
Putin accidentally allowed his separatist allies to genetically cleanse their region.
Yeah, so a total of 3 times he's already gone through the same process where he instigates a uprising of armed rebels that are Russian separatists wanting to join Russia and separate from the previous Soviet nation that they are in currently. And then he uses that justification after they've declared their independence. He then, on behalf of Russia, says he recognizes them now as a different state that wants to be part of Russia, and then goes in with peacekeeping troops, quote unquote, and then takes over the land after fighting off any resistance from the country that he's invading to try to stop them from taking the land. And he's done this 3 times now. And
if you're sitting there thinking, well, Fox, hasn't America allied with an extreme minority of the population to overthrow several governments, and sometimes that has led to ethnic cleansing? I would say we're talking about Russia and Ukraine right now, so shut up.
Yeah. Stop changing subject.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. What's wrong with you?
So... And if this all sounds familiar to you, it's not because America has done this multiple times.
History rhymes, guys. Let's not.
It's because Russia did the same thing in the lead up to the invasion of Ukraine.
Let's be as blunt as possible. Russia's mistake is doing it in Europe. Nobody really cares when you're knocking over sand dunes. People care a lot when you start knocking over European countries, and that is really the issue. That is really the issue.
Yeah, they could have done it in Africa, and no one would have noticed.
As Michael Knowles put it, and was just excoriated on Twitter for it, this is the first time in a very long time that we've had a war between modern nations. Not between a modern nation and a barbarian nation, but between 2 modern powers. And it is different. When you're doing it to a civilized Western nation, it's much different than a collection of hovels that are mostly harboring terrorists. It's a big difference.
Even.
What's that?
Hooches even.
Hooches, yes. Hooches and bird pits.
So Putin misjudged the quality of his military, and so did the West. New evidence suggests that the 40-mile-long Russian convoy of tanks, APCs, armored personnel carriers, and artillery that have been sitting still on their intended route to the Ukrainian capital were stopped. They've been stopped for the last 4 days due to maintenance issues and a lack of logistical support. Russian vehicles appear to have been poorly maintained, resulting in dry rotted tires failing them and not enough spare tires to replace them. Russia does not have the air superiority, even so, after a week with a far superior number of aircraft and far superior quality of aircraft, they still don't have air superiority. And their troops have resorted to looting towns, according to reports I can't verify, for food and water.
Wow, they basically just regress themselves to Fallout universe.
Right.
All of these systems. So here's an interesting little factoids here. All of these systems that the globalists, our supposed elites, have put into. Oh, thank you, Shaman King, for sending us a lemon. All of these systems and unions and NATO's and groups and all of this stuff. So you've got the United Nations, you got the European Union, you got NATO. All of these organizations were designed by our quote-unquote elites and the globalists over the last 40 years. And they were meant to create world peace and to ensure world peace. And in the last 7 days, they have all completely failed in that duty. At extraordinary cost, these institutions were created. And these institutions are largely responsible for a lot of the social decay that the West has seen because of these globalist systems being instituted into your lives and then the tax dollars being extracted from you. We have... just to run down the list here, we got the UN. The UN was supposed to stop World War III. That was the entire point of it, was if you have this fraternity of nations, we'll never go to war again because we will always have a forum in which to talk about it. And when Russia decided to invade the Ukraine, what did the UN do? At the cost of trillions of dollars in the last 60 years, and some of the most valuable real estate in New York, the best the UN could muster when staring down the barrel of a potential flashpoint for World War III was that it gave a forum for the Ukrainian minister to tell the Russian minister that he was probably going to go to hell for war crimes. That really happened. You can look up the clip. But on the day of the invasion, the Ukrainian representative at the UN told the Russian representative that war criminals go to hell. So basically, we spent all of that money, all of this effort, all of the promises that the UN was going to stop World War III, and when push came to shove, the best they could muster was go to hell? Wow.
That's pretty weak.
Yeah, great. I'm
worth the trillions of dollars, I'd say.
So thrilled that we spent so much investment in that. And then you had NATO, who was specifically, not just to avert World War III, but specifically to avert war with Russia. Well, NATO was the thing that instigated the current crisis. But for NATO, it's likely that this wouldn't have happened at this point in time the way that it happened. Now, it's still likely that Putin would have done some kind of pushing, or it's unimaginable what would have happened with a world without NATO. But the point being, Putin's stated reason for doing what he did is because of NATO existing and NATO trying to expand its boundaries. So, but for NATO, the current crisis would not have played out in the same way that it is currently playing out. So you have this institution designed to prevent war from Russia, actually instigated war with Russia. Then you've got the European Union, which was meant to be this fraternity collection of Europe. It was meant to stop war in Russia, in Europe, because Europe was in a state of near perpetual warfare at some point during every century of the last 10. All the time, Europe is at war. And the European Union was meant to stop that. It was meant to link all their economies together so that they were dependent on each other. They could rely on each other. Again, a fraternalization of nations. And what did the EU do? The EU, through the smearing of their currencies and these extreme environmental regulations, you've got led by Germany denuclear power, not nuclear weapons, but denuclearizing the power grid all over Europe, trying to go over to green energy, which just does not work in a cold climate, which Europe is. And then they became extremely reliant, because of European Union policies, extremely reliant on energy coming out of Russia. So this organization, the EU, which was meant to prevent wars in Europe, made Europe so dependent on Russia that they're now vulnerable anytime Russia does anything, and that also instigated the war. Not to mention the European Union, particularly Germany, paying Russia so much money for energy over the last 5 years. Do you think Russia could have launched this war if they didn't have, $200 billion every year coming in from Germany to buy oil from them? I doubt it. So you've got these 3 organizations that were specifically designed to prevent what's happening right now. And over the course of 7 days, they all completely failed at their mission. These things have been set up for generations at the cost of trillions of dollars. Again, the European Union, the type of destruction that the European has done, or that the European Union has done to the various cultures of all of those countries, is unimaginable. That's why the UK left them. And all for what price? Or all for that price, what did they get for it? Nothing. Now you've got the European Union saying, well, we're gonna go back to energy policy. We're gonna go try and become energy independent again, because obviously this was super silly. Also, the European Union on Monday, I believe, they also voted to give themselves a pay raise. So the delegates to the European Union are they're. Ukraine, that'll come up, but now
the non-voted for delegates, right?
Also, Ukraine has put in an emergency request to join the European Union, which the European Union is actually considering. They're actually considering about whether or not to admit the Ukraine to the European Union, and if that happens, God, I have no fucking clue what the hell is going to happen after that. I mean, you wanna really, really push Putin's buttons, you make Ukraine a part of the European Union. One of Putin's biggest issues with the Ukraine is that it became westernized. He was upset that they lost their quote unquote Soviet values and that they became westernized under Western propaganda, as Dyer was explaining. So you really, really want to push his buttons on that. You make Ukraine part of the EU and you watch what happens.
If you make the only option for getting Ukraine back going to war with Europe, then you're giving him no other option.
Yeah. Now the fourth and the last final organization that has failed us, is something that, we were told that there's something called McDonald's diplomacy. Okay.
Right.
McDonald's diplomacy. This is very important. This is like, top level.
We've invested billions of dollars in buying burgers from them.
Yeah. So, there is this, kind of joke, but not really theory that two nations with a McDonald's in them have never gone to war with each other. Well, that's no longer true. So Russia had McDonald's in it and the Ukraine had McDonald's in it, and they're at war right now. So the fourth institution that was meant to prevent war has collapsed, and that is no longer true. McDonald's diplomacy apparently is a failure, and we spent so much money on clownfic. Maybe that's what it is, Dyer. Maybe the McDonald's diplomacy. Maybe everybody was scared of clownfic, of Ronald McDonald coming for them. So apparently, Putin is not scared of clowns.
I guess McDonald's was not very popular in the Middle East, huh?
Yeah, clearly not. So no, that's a serious point. Is that there was this kind of jokey idea that our quote unquote elites had, that our State Department had, that capitalism will link everybody in to this kind of unofficial supernatural or supranational EU type thing where we're linking all these economies together through capitalism, and because of the capitalism, we will through the capitalism we will extend our Western values through it. That's been the big policy with China. That was a big policy with Russia. The big policy with the European Union. And how did that work? Well, in China was able to reverse that westernization and force all of these big companies into now adopting Eastern values. Russia apparently doesn't give a fuck about McDonald's. McDonald's closed all their franchises in Russia, which is kind of funny. But they don't care. Do you think that the biggest mistake was in assuming that through capitalism we could instill Western values in these people? And maybe we did with the population. I bet there's a lot of people in the population of Russia right now, or they're looking for a Big Mac or maybe a Royale with cheese. But the leaders don't care. The leaders never care. And so this idea that you could change the hearts and minds of the people, but I guess leave their leaders in the same position, it doesn't work either. So we've had a lot of lies told to us. I'd say the four biggest lies is the UN, it was worthless. NATO, it's been worthless. EU, it's been worthless. Capitalism / McDonald's diplomacy, it didn't really work, did it?
That's the big globalist idea, was that if you interconnect every country's economy so that they are dependent on each other and that they're not independent, then they would never go to war with each other. Similar with the globalist view of that Fauci had, where he had scientific diplomacy, where he's like, if we get every country working together on scientific discovery, that would avoid war. That would make countries too dependent on each other to ever willing to go to war with each other. Obviously, those two globalist ideas are absolute idiotic failures, but they should have seen that coming because it didn't make any sense. But why did it take Russia invading Ukraine for them to see that being dependent on your adversary is never going to make you stronger or reduce the chance of war? It just gives them leverage over you.
Well, and it exposes it for what it was, right? Obviously, it was all a big ploy to get families like the Biden family, like the Clinton family, like the Bush family, like all of the other families all around the world, where all of a sudden they just do these little teeny investments, and then they have these ideas about these supranational, there we go, organizations, and then all of a sudden they become fantastically wealthy. And a lot of people are like, hey, how did you get so wealthy? And they're like, stop looking at it. Don't worry about me. I'm making you safe. We've provided safety for you. And go, oh, okay, well, that's fine. You made us safe. Well, that all turned out to be a big lie. We're not any safer, yet they're all a lot richer. I will remind you guys again, Kyiv was shelled this week. There was a horrific video of a large government building in Kyiv being struck by some kind of missile. I don't want to classify the missile. It was just hit by a missile. Horrific explosion on this, the side of this like 5-story building. It was like, wow, that was a pretty big bomb. Well, I have a question. Was that the building, that building that got struck? Was that one of the buildings where the Ukrainian government spent your $1 billion of taxpayer money that Joe Biden sold to them in exchange for protecting Hunter Biden? The headquarters of Burisma, where Hunter Biden had a job at, fake job for $80,000 a month, that headquarters building is in Kyiv. I want to know if that's been shelled or not yet. And so you've got all of these things that the Ukrainian government did to their people on a small scale, saying, look the other way on the corruption. We're keeping you safe by intertwining our interest with these powerful Western elites. Well, the government officials in the Ukraine certainly got really wealthy off of it. Did it make the people any safer? We've got the same thing over here in our country, where you've got powerful elites making a lot of money off of these quote-unquote things that will make us safe, off the military-industrial complex, off of all these nonprofits, etc. And they're saying, well, don't worry about me making a lot of money. We're keeping the country safe. And it's just as much of a lie as it was to the Ukrainian people, who are now getting shelled. And I think that, I hope that the building that got shelled by the Russians, I hope none of the buildings get shelled, but if they do get shelled, I hope they're the ones that were corrupt, where corrupt activities were going on. That would be justice.
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Yeah. I just posted the link to Rumble if you guys can go. I know it doesn't have a dark mode yet, but if you go to Rumble, please follow.
There are Google Chrome plugins that create dark mode on sites that don't have dark mode, so I would suggest looking into those. Which one do I have? I can't remember what this one's. I have a Google plugin, a Chrome plugin called Dark Mode, and it just like toggles the anything that's white and turns it dark. So if you're having problems with the brightness, I know I don't like it either, but there's a Dark Mode plugin for Chrome if you don't like the Rumble setup.
All right.
Where are we at?
So let's talk about Biden's perspective. We spent a lot of time talking about Putin's perspective and all that. But I
know Biden's perspective. Here it is.
What am I doing here?
You don't have to think about it, dude.
To what degree he knows where he is currently. Okay. So Biden probably doesn't want nuclear war with Russia. Just flat out, I don't think that's his goal.
If you don't want nuclear war with Russia, then...
And you ain't black.
Exactly. That's actually pretty terrible, what was just said. He does.
You know who does want nuclear war with Russia?
Nazi fags.
Nazi fags, of course. So he does like war, and he profits a hell of a lot from war. War is his business, and business is good because he keeps making wars. But he doesn't want to push us into World War III intentionally. However, he's also an idiot and losing his fucking mind. And the people around him don't seem very stable as well.
Yeah, I'll remind you that the three horsemen that lost us Afghanistan, which would be Mark Milley, Lloyd Austin, and Joe Biden, they're all the exact same three people that are still in charge right now. So
right.
as good of a job as they did with Afghanistan, just imagine them doing that good of a job with the Ukraine and Russia.
So just as much as Putin and the Russians have miscalculated what was going to happen with Ukraine and miscalculated the quality of their military, we have military leaders who have famously made very costly miscalculations on by not understanding their enemy and making foolish decisions that would seem like the result would be clearly evident. Like, if you don't pull out your troops and your citizens before the loss of the control of the country, that hey, maybe they'll create chaos, maybe that'll end up with Americans being left behind, maybe they'll put your troops in more danger if you try to take off from a freaking civilian airport rather than a military base. These seems like obvious things.
Or like don't leave 80-90 billion dollars worth of perfectly good military
to
behind.
Terrorists.
Yes.
Like these are obvious things, yet they somehow made those miscalculations. So why wouldn't our failed quote-unquote military leaders, why wouldn't they also make similar devastating miscalculations in playing war with Ukraine? And, sometimes a world war doesn't start because someone intended to do something, but because they were incompetent and they made a mistake.
That seems most likely.
I also want to point out that Biden and his Democrat buddies are heavily invested in the energy industry. So war restricting the supply of oil drives up the price of oil, meaning if you're invested in oil, this might actually be an opportunity for you to make a lot of money.
Yeah, so there was an interesting fact check this week that, I can't remember what her name is, but it was a Fox News correspondent. She said that the imports of Russian oil have doubled in the last year. The U.S. has doubled the imports.
This fact check.
Yeah, the U.S. has doubled the import of. Can you maybe find that, because this was a funny one. This was another not fact check. And she said that the U.S. since Biden took office has doubled our imports of Russian oil. And I think it was either PolitiFact or Snopes. They fact checked it and they said, well, this is false. What's true is that the U.S. has doubled the import of Russian oil in the last year. Okay, well, if that's what's true, then what's false? That's what she said. And what was false is that, well, Russian oil still only accounts for 3% of the U.S.'s oil portfolio. It's like, okay, yeah, but she didn't say how much oil it was. She just said that it doubled, and you said that it doubled, so that's true. And so you got to sit there and think about that for a second, because what did Joe Biden's family make a lot of money off of? Let me pull it up here. Make a lot of money off of in the last couple of years that actually Trump got in trouble for trying to investigate. Well, Hunter was all wrapped up in Burisma, which is a oil company that handles a lot of Russian energy. And all of a sudden, as soon as Joe Biden gets into office, we shut down domestic manufacturing and we double our imports from 3% of U.S.'s oil consumption. That's an awful lot of oil. That might be the 100% of the oil consumption of a much smaller nation. So us doubling our imports from Russia and canceling domestic manufacturing because a president whose family is all tied up in Russian energy, all of a sudden he becomes president, and all of a sudden we immediately double our imports from that country. Wow, you want to talk about absolute corruption. Yeah, so it was Maria Badarano. She said, we have doubled our oil imports from Russia in the last year. And PolitiFact has...
Fourth paragraph.
Fourth paragraph. It's not this?
No. Oh, you can also read that, but
okay.
It's also in the paragraphs.
Yeah, so this is from PolitiFact, and they say, if your time is short, the most recent data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows that U.S. increased its oil imports from Russia by about 28% in the first 11 months. The U.S. did double the amount of crude oil imported. So they say the U.S. did double the amount of crude oil imported from Russia in the last year. But Russia only accounts for 3% overall of U.S. crude oil imports. Now, this is interesting because I think that this 28% is a little bit of a lie, because when we get oil, not all of it gets burned for energy. Most of it goes into, in fact, the majority of a barrel of oil is going to be processed into plastics or various chemicals that are used in various industries. I think it's only about 5 gallons worth of a 55-gallon oil drum. Only about 5 gallons worth of it can be turned into automobile gasoline or jet fuel kerosene. Not a lot of it turns into energy. Most of it turns into raw material products. So I think that increasing our energy from Russia 28%, I think that actually kind of accounts for what those numbers I just gave you. But we did double the amount of crude oil that we imported from Russia over the last year. So what's true is that it's true. Now there's a video of this, which we'll watch here real quick.
In Russia, and you don't see any serious move on minerals and mining. So pretty much what Vladimir Putin is watching is a weak response from the United States. China is watching it as well and is likely thinking, well, we can do what we want to do. All this as oil prices move higher and our adversaries are empowered. And I'm not just talking about Russia, but also Iran. It looks like we are imminently getting back into an Iran deal, but they've been making billions in the black market as prices of oil skyrocket. Russia as well. And by the way, the United States is also reliant on Russian oil. We've doubled our imports from Russia in the last year. So no question why President Biden is.
Yeah, and as is, thank you, PolitiFact, for fact-checking this for us. PolitiFact says, yes, we did double the amount of crude oil imported from Russia last year. So that's absolutely true. And again, what happened in the last year? Well, Joe Biden became president. And why is it important? Well, Joe Biden's son Hunter, as confirmed through 3 laptops now, was making money off of energy deals with Russia. So you do the math. You do the math on that. And so this is the very real danger that the majority of our idiot countrymen, because they didn't like Trump's tweets or they think, black people are getting genocided or something. This is a very real, and the green energy people, my gosh, the green energy people, this is the very real danger that they put all of us in.
Yep.
All right, where are we at in the notes here?
New Russian law.
So a new Russian law was passed this week, giving 15 years in jail to anyone who has been spreading misinformation about the Russian military. Included in misinformation about the Russian military is reporting on a law that was passed giving reporters of misinformation 15 years in jail.
Yes. Showing any videos of what the Russian military are actually doing is also being considered misinformation because it's showing what's happening.
Which is their tires exploding out from underneath of their APCs because they didn't exercise the tires because they're idiots.
Exactly. So also both sides of the conflict have shown recently videos of them kindly treating POWs, while both sides also explicitly said or evidence was supposedly found of them saying that they're going to, if the conflict doesn't end, they're going to start executing POWs. I thought those two stories side by side seemed a little funny.
Yeah, that's another thing, too. You got these Geneva Conventions, right? So that's another big institution that, we were told, Geneva Conventions, war crimes, etc., and that just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist anymore. I guess we'll see what happens after the fact, but it certainly did not act as any kind of deterrent. That can be sure. Maybe we'll get some justice in the courts after the fact, but I seem to doubt it. And can you really get justice if your family was slaughtered because some Russian soldier needed to get some milk and eggs out of your fridge because it was too expensive because Kroger's was price fixing it?
My opinion on the one-sided application of the Geneva Conventions that seems to have only ever been applied to the U.S. military. I'm not really supposed to disagree with them.
It is Dyer's opinion that the Geneva Conventions are right and just, and he abides by them.
Exactly, I respect them, and I uphold them in all in my own command and in my own actions.
The reality of the Geneva Conventions is that the Western nations, after seeing the aggression that the U.S. showed in saving their ass for the second time in a century, really in a decade or a couple decades at that point. The Geneva Conventions were really meant to help the Western nations bridle their own people. That is what my opinion is. It was meant to be a way for the elites to say, we need strong men to fight our wars for us, to go get our oil and resources, etc. But we don't want them getting out of hand. So we're going to create this legal system where if we decide they did something that makes us uncomfortable, we can just put them in jail for the rest of their lives. That's basically what the Geneva Conventions are. It's a way for the ritzy elite tea drinkers to stay safe from the brutes like Dyer who destroy doors every time you open it.
So it's similar to how back during Revolutionary era, they used to march in lines, and they had gentlemen's rules about not shooting officers because people who were not affected by the realities of war made rules to make them feel like that they were being honorable in how they were fighting wars, and they were not the brutes or evil ones. So they were willing to, because they lived in a position of privilege. They were willing to take the loss of efficiency and effectiveness and the loss of lives just to maintain the air that they are better than their adversary.
Yes, they'd let people like Dyer just die so that they could feel better at their next dinner party. Alrighty, Lindsey Graham and Sean Hannity, both noted combat infantrymen. They have implored the Russian people to assassinate Putin and suggested that perhaps Western nations should just start bombing the 40-mile long column of Russian vehicles, which, I don't know, to be fair, Russia appears to have committed a large chunk of their fighting force, at least their fighting capable force, as Dyer's explained to me before, and I'll explain it to you now so that he doesn't have to. We have a lot of people in our military, so does every other country. Well, every other country with a military. A lot of the people that are in the military aren't combat soldiers, or they're not in a combat-facing position. They're in a support role. And so that's the same thing with Russia. So as big as the military is, the number of troops that are capable of fighting, and part of that capability is training and then also equipment. You're not going to have full combat kit for every support military soldier that you've got. So Russia has a lot of support people, and they don't have that much kit for them. So pretty much every Russian soldier that's able to fight and all of their fighting kit is mostly deployed right now. I believe that they've held a little bit back, and some of those numbers are just unknowable. But it would appear from publicly available numbers that Russia has committed really a lot, more than half, almost all of their fighting capable force in both manpower and machine power. And, if somebody were to, I don't know, just carpet bomb 40 miles of that road into Kyiv, it would kind of take Russia off the board. Now, the issue with that is that Russia does have something in reserve, and that would be nuclear weapons. So while Russia may have overextended its conventional military force, if somebody did attack them, they would have nothing left in their back pocket to use except for nukes. So this actually makes Russia a little bit more dangerous, them not being very good at tactics, apparently, or underestimating the Ukrainian people or overestimating their own military capabilities. This is actually probably that alone has made it much more dangerous, just because Russia will now feel vulnerable because so much of their force is overextended right now, and they really have no ability to respond to any kind of incursion or attack other than with nuclear weapons at this point.
Right, and Russia is on a razor's edge right now because their economy is collapsing. They are being restricted from resources, and wars alone have been fought over the restriction of resources and a country becoming desperate because of lack of them losing control of their populace and them not having the supplies they need, and that another country is holding back from them. That alone is the justification for war. Throw in the whole, I believe that we're already under attack from the West. They're trying to take away our country. That's another motivation for war. Maybe not one on its own to justify it, but it's been enough of a justification for them to invade Ukraine. Now, the warmongers on both sides of the aisle right now have been demanding that U.S. impose a no-fly zone and, as Fox said, bomb Russian military vehicles in Ukraine. These are acts of war that are they're overt acts of war. And I would say that we've been at war with Russia for a while, and that they've been freely attacking our industry with cyber attacks, shutting down pipelines, shutting down power plants, shutting down water plants and intentionally damaging us. So
they put lead in the pipes and errors into Joe Biden's teleprompter. Crazy.
They didn't do that.
Are you sure?
I mean,
because if they didn't do it, then that means the Democrats did it.
I'm just going to lean on the possibility that Biden might be deteriorating and an idiot. Anyway,
they
so
put lead in his pipes.
He's. I'm not going to want to find out. We don't. If we're going to go to war, if we're going to attack those Russian vehicles, if we're going to do a no-fly zone, that is an act of war, and you don't do half measures in war. Definitely not half measures with a nuclear power who, if you give them the opportunity to counterpunch, they'll be counterpunching with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and so because of that, any kind of first strike by the West would have to be a last strike. It'd have to be first strike, last strike. So we would have to, and this is why we can't do anything, because if we were to do something, we would have to simultaneously, over the course of about 6 hours, essentially eliminate as much of Russia and Moscow and their military all in one big go. We'd have to launch every plane we have to carpet bomb that whole column. We would have to have all of our interceptor missile stuff ready to go, all pointed at Russia, and start nuking as many of their military targets as we possibly can. There is no little bit of war with Russia, just a la carte. I'll have can I have a sample spoon of war with Russia? No, it's all or nothing. It has to be a nuclear holocaust in Russia or nothing. We cannot.
There is two options. Two options. Only two. The first one is if you're assuming you're going to make a conventional military strike against Russia. Option one is you do that and you do everything. You are going to be demanding the mass genocide of Russians and the complete destruction of their country. Or you don't do that. You just strike those military targets in Ukraine, and you will give Russia the opportunity to do that to America, and then also it will likely happen to Russia as well and many other European countries. He's not just going to launch missiles at America. He's going to launch them at all of our allies in NATO. So if you want to reduce the human suffering if you're solid on wanting to go to war with Russia, if you want to reduce the human suffering and the loss of life, you go with scenario one, where you go all out and only one country and its population are destroyed. Now, if you don't, America is gone. Yeah. America might destroy Russia too, but there are so many missiles.
The war between Russia and America will be over within 6 hours. It just depends on how aggressive we are in the first 6 minutes as to whether or not we're going to be the winners or the losers.
So those people who are saying they want us to do this, they're saying that because of the threat posed by the invasion of Ukraine, the losses of life, which is in the thousands right now, justifies the loss of life in the billions.
Yeah, if you or you're hearing somebody advocate for us bombing that 40-mile convoy right now, there is no little bit of war. So what you're actually saying is that you want to go to full-scale nuclear war with Russia, and so there's really no point in bombing that column right off the bat. Maybe you could just nuke it.
Just leave them there.
Yeah, really. But
they're not the problem.
Yeah, but Hannity might as well, and Lindsey Graham might as well have been saying we should nuke Moscow, which I'm sure that's a consideration that should always be on the table. Every capital of every country, it should always be on the table. We could nuke them, even when we're not at war with them. We should always keep that in the back pocket as a plan. You don't need to be publicly broadcasting it on Twitter. Thank you, Lindsey Graham, who I believe is on certain committees where he really needs to be careful about what he's saying in a war context. Like, Jesus Christ. Hannity is just a tard. But no, that there is no little bit of war. So to suggest any amount of war, if you're not suggesting full-scale nuclear war, first strike nuclear, then you're just living in fantasy land. I'm not personally prepared to suggest that we get a full-scale first strike nuclear war with Russia. However, if I was, that would be my recommendation.
Yes, and I don't think that the loss of life in Ukraine and them having to fight for their own country, when we're giving them the weapons to do so and the humanitarian aid to do so, I don't think that threat posed there to the world justifies the mass murder of billions of people.
Yep. Alrighty.
And there is a situation where that would be justified, but this is not it.
Yes. So, because we're not going to go to war with them, except for we are, because we really love going to war. The White House, which should be the House itself, not necessarily Joe Biden, has asked Congress to approve a $10 billion aid package in lethal and humanitarian aid, which I almost read as lethal humanitarian aid for Ukraine. So, let's see here. So the acting Office of Management and Budget Director, Shalanda Yang, has suggested that the initial $10 billion request for the Ukraine would address, quote, the immediate needs, and more funding could be issued if needed. So they just want to have $10 billion as a start and then keep going from there. Mind you, Trump only needed $20 billion to finish the border wall, and they want to send over $10 billion to Ukraine today. That $10 billion would include $4.8 billion directly to the Department of Defense, which would, under that $4.8 billion, $1.8 billion of that would be in support of regional U.S. militaries in the European Command and NATO. $1.3 billion would go to cybersecurity and other defense support. $1.8 billion would go to replenish DoD stockpiles. The remaining $5 billion for the State Department and U.S. Agency for International Development would include $2.8 billion in humanitarian assistance like food and other support, $500 million in military assistance through Foreign Military Financing Program, and $1.8 billion in economic assistance to help, quote, support the community of government and resilience of the Ukrainian people, as well as emergent needs in the region. So all of this money that we've been spending on NATO, we're going to spend more to bolster NATO. No. We already spent money on NATO. We've been spending money on NATO for 30 years. If NATO, what was NATO doing? We've not been at war. They should have been saving that money. They should have been building the stockpiles. They should have been creating equipment and then maintaining that equipment. What the hell do they need more money for? What are they talking about? So this is what the elites do to you. They create, again, these supranational organizations where, this is going to keep you safe. Yeah, but like all you're doing is raising my taxes and all of a sudden your family's getting rich. Yeah, we are, but we're going to make you more safe. Okay. And then what happens when push comes to shove is, one, NATO didn't keep us safe. One, it instigated the current crisis. And then all of a sudden, well, we're going to need another $10 billion. Why? Well, we got to bolster NATO. What do you mean bolster NATO? It's been going for 30 years. Like, the U.S. military has been depleted because we've been at war for 20 years, but NATO's not been at war for 20 years. Why is NATO depleted? Why does it need a $10 billion stimulus to get it going again? What's it been doing? That's insane. That's insane that we have to, I guess, repay NATO to get it going when that was the whole point. It's like an insurance policy. It's like you crashed your car. You've been paying on the insurance policy for the last 6 years, and all of a sudden the insurance policy is like, yeah, but we're going to need you to pay that deductible. So I guess that actually is how insurance works. So I guess that kind of defeated my my analogy there. But Dyer, take it away. Save me from this.
Hey, I got some good news for you. It looks like Rumble's chat is working. And I didn't do anything, but I'm going to take credit for having fixed it, having done nothing, but it's not working. So there you go. Triumvirate just posted in the chat, and it is working. In your face.
Alrighty.
Well, I want to point out that we are at 10 pages out of 20 pages of notes. And how long has the show been going?
Well, normally it would have been 3 hours at this point. However, we started super late. So I think we can rip through story C. We'll skip story D. I think we can... I don't know. We can always stream another day this week, too.
That's true. Other days do exist in the calendar. I checked.
You can... You have much more of a time limit than I do. You can pick what you want to do for the rest of the show. Just do it quickly.
Okay, let's do C.
All right. So, why would you pick that picture, Dyer? I have to look at it. You may remember GOP House candidate Jeff Younger from a previous story from over 2 years ago. Younger was in a custody battle over his son because the child's mother, his former wife, was trying to force transition her 6-year-old son into snipping off his bits and becoming a girl. Jeff and the mother were in a contentious court battle, with the mother fighting for the right to force her child into a sexual mutilation. The mother of James Younger originally won her previous court cases last October that allowed her to give James life-changing, dangerous, cancerous hormones that block the natural development of puberty. A later court decision determined that the parents had to jointly agree on any medical procedures, which included the hormone therapy mutilation surgery.
Yes, that's good news. It's sad that it took years and multiple court battles and a time where the child was being mentally scarred by being forced to dress like and act like a girl while with the mother, while choosing on his own to not do those things when away from the mother, being told by a trans activist who is also licensed as a therapist, a trans therapist, being told that he is really a girl, and trying to convince him to go along with the hormone therapy and surgery. It's sad that it went this long. However, the boy now no longer, though still being forced to be around the mother, is no longer permitted to have the hormone therapy and was not forced to go through the surgery. Because of this whole situation, Jeff Younger decided to get into politics because he realized that the politics that he had ignored his whole life came back and bit him in the ass and tried to cut his kid's dick off.
Yep. And we'll watch that here, which I think it went not well. So what was that?
So he went to a North Texas university to he was invited by a young conservatives group, and there was only supposed to be 80 people there at the event, and he was just going to be speaking about conservative topics, and he's also kind of campaigning at the same time for a House seat. And a leftist group, realizing he was going to give a speech on campus, and he was going to have a relatively small group of supporters there, all of whom were also students, they decided to send in a mob of people to shut him down. His response to them doing this was to actually egg them on to say that he wants America to see how crazy they are. He goaded them into engaging with him, and that's resulted in multiple videos of them looking crazy and him being calm, cool, and collected. Because this is the kind of people he is in political warfare against, right? So he was fine with them being highlighted as being insane.
Yeah, I think I think some of this is a mistake in legal definitions. I think that the fight for one parent against another parent to not have their child be transitioned, especially a child that young, 6, my gosh, and that all started when he was like 3, I think. I think that you need to not be going at it about this, like, unclear medical kind of privilege and, who has the right to do this. No, I think you should just look at it and say, my wife, she has a weird pedophilic sexual fetish for chopping off the penises of young boys, and I'm not going to let that happen. She needs to be registered as a sex offender, and she needs to lose custody of the child because she is a pedophile who is obsessed with his penis and wants to cut it off because she's a weird fetishist. I think that's how you need to approach this, and just go full bore with that. And that's not a family court issue. That's a legal court issue. I think that we need to start looking at these things with these adults who are so concerned and hyper-focused on small children having sex and doing weird genital mutilation things. I think that needs to be treated as pedophilia. I think that it's a weird sexual fetish that these people have. Clearly, the trans thing, you can call it a fetish, you can call it whatever you want, but when you start having a desire for other people to do a thing, that is clearly a fetish, especially in a sexual context. And so when you've got a mother who's looking at her 6-year-old boy and has this desire to see him cut off his penis and to watch him parade around in a dress for her enjoyment, I can't see that as anything other than pedophilia pedophilia connected with a weird sexual kink that she must have. And it needs to be treated as such. And I think that's how we should approach this moving forward. I think that's what judges need to start doing. That's what parents need to do when they go find lawyers, and the judges who are seeing these cases need to realize the truth of it is that these people are mentally unwell, they're pedophiles, and they have an hyper focus on child's genitalia. That is problematic, and they need to be put on a list, and they need to be kept away from children.
Another angle is she became newly born into the trans left-wing religion after she was already married and after she already had her child, which is one reason why they ended up getting divorced. Is Younger didn't believe in this crazy ideology this new religion that she had adopted, and it was suggested that as punishment for the divorce, one way of getting back at Jeff Younger was she was going to take away his son, to ruin his son for him, so that because he was really proud of having. He was really proud of his son. He really loved his son, and this was her way of getting back at him. So if nothing else, this is clearly child abuse. I think that even suggesting giving hormone therapy to children or cutting off their dicks should be considered child abuse.
Yeah, and we don't tolerate it for... I mean, this has been a big issue before the trans issue was with female genital mutilation by Islam. They have a hyper focus on child genitalia as well because they have a religion that institutionalizes pedophilia. So I think that this needs to be looked at the same as that, which we've not allowed, or there's been a lot of resistance to genital mutilation being performed for any purpose, for religious purposes. And I think that this needs to be extended off to circumcisions as well. There's this weird focus and tradition that we have in the West for again. I don't know what it is about adults and wanting to fuck around with small children's dicks and vaginas. It's so gross. Stop. And I think that we just need to end all procedures that allow parents to have these weird fetishizations about what their children's genitalia looks like. Stop.
I only had the opportunity to do this once, but the one opportunity I had where a doctor asked me if I wanted to have a circumcision of my son, I gave him a very pointed question about why he was asking if he cut off part of my kid's dick. It seems kind of inappropriate.
Dyer pinned him up against the wall with a K-bar and said, "I'll circumcise you first." I asked my mom why she did it to me, and she's like, "I don't know. It was just tradition." I'm like, wow, what a fucking reason. Thanks. Asshole. What a great fucking reason.
Yeah. So I never talked to my mom about it, but she asked me, "Hey, did you have your son circumcised?" And I'm like, No, I did not. I don't think it makes sense to cut off a part of someone's body without their consent. Even with their consent, but it doesn't make sense if I'm harming the person. But especially, why would you do any medical procedure on someone who can't consent?
Yeah, so just to make sure that we're all clear here, Dyer and I have a universal value of don't fuck with children's penises.
We have strong feelings about don't fuck with kids.
Stop being worried about them. Stop cutting them. Stop doing things to them. Stop dressing them up in skirts. So this isn't a case of and some other commentators do have this as a problem where they believe that it's okay in a religious circumstance, but not in, some religions, and also not in the trans religion circumstance. No, Dyer and I have a universal value of, no, this is not okay in any circumstance. Don't do it. And we need to treat people we need to start stigmatizing this idea that you can do that to a child. We should start stigmatizing it by starting with the trans activists, labeling them as pedophiles, as they rightfully are. I think that if you are in a religious context or just a Western tradition context, I think that it is more forgivable because of why that's kind of a cultural understanding. But this whole trans thing, this is very, very new, and it is specifically sexual. It's specifically about child sexual behavior, and that's why it's very specifically pedophilic. I think the other stuff's bad. I don't think it falls into the realm of pedophilia intentionally the way that the trans stuff does, but the trans stuff does.
There are people a lot of people who've been taught that circumcision on men is a medical necessity because there can be complications if you don't, or it's dirty if you don't. People have made those arguments to me, and their intent is different, right? That they think they've been taught that it is important and necessary to do it, and it's healthier to do it. But then
it's like a mask for your dick, and now all of a sudden everyone wants to wear masks, and then masks are bad, and then they're good, and they're bad, and it's just, come on.
But the argument falls apart when they realize that there are lots of people who aren't circumcised, and they don't have those problems that they're suggesting.
Listen, if it was something that was medically dangerous or something that was dirty that caused infection at a high rate, humanity would have unevolved that a long time ago. The fact of the matter is that we, whether evolution's a fantasy or not, we have the perception that we've evolved over the course of millions of years, and evolution would have filtered that out if it was a problem. So there is no argument about why it's bad or whatever. If it was medically dangerous, it would have been filtered out by evolution a long time ago, and it just wasn't, because there's not a problem with it. So stop worrying about your child's penis. Let him worry about it in 18 years.
So all that said, I actually support the religious backing that our country was built on, because it is very ingrained in the values that built our nation. I think that a religion is the right kind of religion, often is the kind of motivation or gives someone personal value that helps them live a healthier and happier life, right? I get that some people need that and they believe in that's real to them. I'm fine with your religion as long as what your religion is teaching is not harming other people. Just because I believe you should have the freedom to believe and do what you want, as long as the things you are believing are not impeding the natural rights of other citizens.
Tonsil removal is always done for medical necessity. I don't think that anybody just removes tonsils for aesthetic or cosmetic reasons. Ear piercings are usually something that a child either demands or wants. There's not a lot of parents that will pierce the ears of their children without the child's consent. I also think that that's a much smaller change and a more common change in the West. I see your point. And I'm justifying it ad lib here, but I do think that there's a difference in the qualitative nature of it. At the end of the day, we are humans, and I think that there are certain things that we can make judgment calls on, and it doesn't need to necessarily have this like specific reasoning for it, but I think that there is a qualitative difference between piercing the ears of your child and cutting off the labia or the foreskin of your child. Also, I mean, a lot of adults have genital piercings. Do you think that it's comparable to give an ear piercing to your child as it would be to give them a Prince Johnson piercing? Would that be equivalent, or would there be something qualitatively different about it? So I see your point on the ear piercing thing, but I would ask, equivalent of ear piercing, would you allow them to pierce the penis of a 1-year-old? Is that an equivalent behavior or not? And if not, why?
So I'm not going on a campaign trying to get circumcision banned. I will definitely argue up and down with anyone that I think is unnecessary and immoral to do it. But That I care far more about the far more serious problem of people cutting kids' dicks and labias off. That is far more concerning and far more damaging of a problem. But I'm going to tell you my opinions about circumcision. Now, on the topic of ear piercings, now my daughter and my wife were pestering me for 2 years to get ear piercing. I kept telling them, no, like I don't like the idea of making a surgical a change to her body. Can't you just put on pin-on earrings, right? Like you can wear earrings without making a piercing. Like also, this is the practical idea. This is a freaking 5-year-old. They could easily get something caught on the earring and actually rip her earlobe open. It happens. Right?
Yeah, and just because some parents make irresponsible children for their child doesn't mean that we should just allow that to happen. So like, yes, ear piercing is common, but does that mean that we should allow that to happen either? I don't know. I mean, what if what about tattoos? I mean, again, I'm talking about a qualitative difference between ear piercing and other body modifications. Is it okay for a mother to take her 5-year-old daughter and to go get a full sleeve tattoo? Is it okay? So ear piercings. What about gauges? What about a mother who takes her child in to get 00 gauges, who's 3 years old, and it has these giant earlobe gauges? Is that okay? I mean, it's just ear piercings, right? No, there's obviously a qualitative difference. And to bring it back to the original topic is the qualitative difference between the trans issue and these other things, which are more, it's more, I'm going to say it's not harmless, but it's more ritualized. It's more of a cultural institution that people do because they don't really realize why they're doing it. The trans stuff is specifically done because these trans encouraging parents have a fantasy about what kind of sex their child is going to be having. And in this mother's fantasy, her 6-year-old son is having sex without a penis. And the qualitative difference there is a fantasization about the sex, the intercourse that a child is going to be having. And that's the problem, and that's why these people need to be labeled as pedophiles.
Are the two of us ready for judgment? I'm not sure what that means. Judgment from Slowpoke could probably involves a very large phallus.
the judgment, well, yeah, it's a covenant with God. So I'm not Jewish, so that didn't apply to me.
So yeah, I, for everyone who's not reading chat, after like 2 years of pestering me for the earrings, my wife and my daughter, I ended up giving them to her for, I think it was her birthday, because she cried when I told her no, and she just fucking got me. She's like, my wife's sitting there while she's crying, like, come on, she'll be fine. She's not gonna rip her ears. She's not gonna get infected. Like,
Dyer's such a sucker.
I know. My daughter turned me into a sucker. Anyways, so I guess I'm a hypocrite there. I did end up giving her earrings.
You're a terrible parent. You basically, never mind.
Basically Hitler.
Yes.
This
right.
next story is way too long.
It's also a fake story, so.
Oh, wait. It's shorter because it's fake. Let's do that.
Yeah, we can do that real quick. Okay, so there was this story, which for some... Oh, I guess we have Bartiromo again. I thought this was the old clip, but I guess Bartiromo was involved. Man, she's been busy this week. All right, so Maria Bartiromo again. She didn't really break, but she kind of helped bring to the forefront a story that was then written up by the Daily Mail, I believe, and the story, we were doing a bunch of research on it. We were going to bring you the story today because we thought it was very interesting. But through our research, we actually found out that it was just fake. It's just not true. So you may have heard, and I'm going to explain to you why it's not true. You may have heard that Moderna, one of the big 3 vaccine manufacturers, they were found to have a patent for a genetically engineered sequence, and I'll go through that in a second. And in that genetically engineered sequence that they had a patent for, there existed 19 letters in common with the current coronavirus. So SARS-CoV-2 as the official scientific name. And so a lot of people were looking at this and going, oh my God, why does Moderna have a patent on the genetic sequence that the current coronavirus has? That's crazy. Did they make it? Did they own it? And so there was some investigation into this patent. And let's see here. So InfoWars and the Daily Mail reported on it. Again, this is fake news, and I'll explain why. So Daily Mail reported that the scientists claim COVID virus contains a tiny chunk of DNA that matches a sequence patented by Moderna 3 years before the pandemic began. I don't know what happened, but my ad blocker just does not work anymore. And I forgot what it was like to navigate the web without an ad blocker. It's just too much stuff. Obviously Kroger's. Here's Kroger's. Those demons, they're fixing the price of eggs. Alrighty. So is it true that Moderna owns the patent on some of the DNA that ended up in the coronavirus? Well, first off, viruses don't have DNA, they have RNA. So great job, Daily Mail. So just peak science here. I also noticed during this that Moderna, the last 3 letters of their name is RNA, which, given that they deal with genetics, seems to, maybe that was a little pun that they put in there. So here is, I guess, I don't want to read too much of this because it's all fake, but basically what it says is there's this patent that Moderna has. Okay. So if you read the patent, which I did today, the patent is for a protein that Moderna has engineered to have some effect on cancer cells. So it's essentially a genetically engineered protein that is designed to kill cancer cells or to stop cancer cells from replicating, which is, if that's true, if it works, that's insane. That's crazy. Maybe Joe Biden's right. Maybe we'll have killed out cancer by the end of his administration. I really hope, I hope that Moderna is successful with this product. I think that'd be great. But basically, again, what they're trying to do is genetically engineer a protein that they could put into a pill of some kind and give it to you, and then you could eat that pill, and then those proteins wander around your body, and then they go in, or an injection or whatever, they wander around your body, and then they get sucked into the cancer cells, and then they basically just gum up the cancer cells and kill them off. And so you don't have to have radiation. You could have it targeted to just the cancer cells, and then you get cancer, you take a pill, next month you're good to go. It'd be perfect, right? Wouldn't that be just amazing? And so isn't it strange that this cancer cure has sequences in common with the coronavirus? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so Dyer was telling me about this morning. He's like, I found this story. We got to figure out if it's true or not. And I said right off the bat, well, what would really sell it to me if it was true is if the sequence that was in common was the sequence in the coronavirus that was the furon cleavage site. What's the furon cleavage site? Well, the furon cleavage site is this weird sequence that's found in the coronavirus that, or at least in COVID, the COVID version of the coronavirus, that exists on the part of the RNA that creates the spike proteins. The spike proteins, the infamous spike proteins, are the things that allow COVID to be so successful in infecting humans. Those spike proteins are the keys to get into your cells. And without those keys, you can't get infected by a coronavirus. And so COVID not only has keys to get into human cells, it has really, really good keys. And the only reason that coronavirus has good keys is because there is this teeny little 3-letter long strip called a furon cleavage site. And what does that furon cleavage site do? Well, there's an enzyme in your body. Obviously, the human body was either engineered or developed evolved over a very long period of time to have a lot of systems that work together. So there's an enzyme called furon, and it looks for a very specific sequence of 3 amino acid groups together. And whenever it finds those 3 amino acids, which amino acids create proteins, so whenever it finds those 3 amino acids on a protein, it cuts it, it snips it, it cleaves it. So it cuts the protein, and the one side of the protein goes off and becomes its own independent protein, and the other one goes off and does its own independent protein stuff. So our bodies have developed with this in mind. And so a lot of our DNA has furon cleavage sites in it so that our body can create these, your cells will create these very long protein strands, which don't do anything on their own. And they've all got furon cleavage sites in them. And so the furon comes around and snips them. And then you can bulk make a really long protein that doesn't do anything. Furon comes along, turns it into 10 little pieces that do 10 little things. Isn't that great? So our bodies evolved to use this furon for our benefit to help create proteins. What does COVID do? Well, COVID and a lot of other viruses have somehow learned, most other viruses have developed it naturally, to use, as you know, viruses hijack the systems in our body that already exist. One of the systems that viruses can hijack is the furon cleavage. And so they will insert into themselves, or they'll evolve to have these furon cleavage sites, and they'll utilize your body's own enzymes to cut their proteins into different shapes to do more useful things. So why is this important for COVID? Well, every other coronavirus that is in the genetic lineage and the family tree of the current coronavirus or current COVID doesn't have a furon cleavage site on the spike protein. For some reason, COVID-19 does. And it does in this very specific spot that when it gets clipped, it creates the spike protein that is so perfect at unlocking your cells, it has infectivity 1,000 times better than the next coronavirus does. So that was a red flag at the beginning of the pandemic, and Direwolf Media covered this almost 2 years ago now. I did a lot of coverage on this, that it would seem to us, and it would seem to a lot of geneticists, that it was unlikely that coronavirus could just evolve this very specific, very tiny change that would have such a large and very specifically more infectious effect on it. There's a large understanding of how viruses evolve. And the general consensus, which we're not going to go into tonight, is that the furon cleavage site, the way that it appeared, if you look at the ancestor to the modern coronavirus, there are a set of letters that code for a protein, and it makes a big, bulky, gross-looking spike protein that doesn't do anything. When it goes into the human cells, it just bumps up against it, and the keys don't work. It's this big, unwieldy protein for the spike protein. The furon cleavage site, all of a sudden, it just magically evolved this furon cleavage site in the middle of the spike protein. All of a sudden, human furon comes around, snips it, and it creates this very delicate, lacy, perfect, it's the best, the perfect spike protein to unlock your cells, get inside, and infect you. So it seemed odd that no other coronavirus has figured this cleavage site out the way that coronavirus did. And there's no kind of missing record, missing link coronaviruses that have half of a furon cleavage site or, a fifth of a cleavage site. There's no genetic evolutionary steps for it to have gotten from no cleavage site to a cleavage site. And so that's why a lot of people were looking at that and saying, wow, that seems evident that somebody engineered that cleavage site, and they stuck it in that specific position because they knew intuitively, in a way that evolution couldn't know, that it had used human intuition to know that if you clip that protein right there, you're going to make a much more infectious virus. And that fits right in line with all of the gain of function stuff that we've known about all throughout the pandemic. So why does that relate to this? Well, I told Dyer, I don't believe this story. I don't believe that Moderna has a patent on this sequence or on anything that's related to the coronavirus sequence, unless it is this cleavage site. If it turns out that Moderna has the patent on how to insert this cleavage site, then I'll believe it. Then I will believe you, Dyer, that this is a thing that is a probability.
Believe me, you stop me making the argument.
Yeah, Dyer Wolf did this investigation, and he made this claim. No, but I told him, I would believe the Daily Mail that this is true if it turned out that the thing that was in common in the Moderna patent was the cleavage site. And you can tell the audience, Dyer, I said that completely unprompted without having read anything, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden, Dyer's reading it. He goes, "Oh my God, Fox, you were right." So the thing that matches is literally specifically that furon cleavage site. And so then I had to look at myself in the mirror for a little bit and say, okay, do I really believe this? And so we investigated it. So it seems weird. Again, the thing that makes coronavirus so infectious is that furon cleavage site. Without it, it can't get into your cells. It's literally the single point of failure that COVID has that has caused this pandemic. So if that's a genetic engineered marker, that's really important. And so if Moderna's got a sequence for that, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So I started reading into this. And what I found out was that if you read the patent, and nowhere in the Daily Mail article does it say that the patent Moderna has is for a cancer treatment protein. It doesn't say that anywhere in here. To find that, you have to go into the links and follow the link tree to find the original patent that Moderna filed, and then you can find out, oh, they're using this protein to try to cure cancer. So what does that mean? Well, I thought, because of the way the Daily Mail put this article, I thought Moderna had a patent on a full coronavirus that had this furon cleavage site in it. That's what they made it sound like. And so you read this and you go, oh my gosh, Moderna has a patent on the genome for COVID? And it's the same kind of COVID that's infecting us? My gosh, this is terrible. And that would be terrible, except for it's just not true. So why does it not matter that Moderna has a patent that has this furon cleavage site in it? Well, for the same reason that I'm telling you about the furon cleavage site. I know about the furon cleavage site because it's an extremely well-known sequence that does a very specific thing, and it's extremely useful for any kind of genetic engineering. So if Moderna is genetically engineering proteins to cure cancer, you can be guaranteed they're going to have the furon cleavage site in there because it's a useful tool in how to program a protein that you're going to be putting into the human body, because now you can start leveraging. You don't have to have all of these extra genetic sequences to create the perfect protein. You can just get really, really close and then hijack the regular human processes to help finish it up for you by snipping it in the right place. And that's what Moderna did. It was very smart, and I'm sure that they probably have very good geneticists there. So why is this fake news again? Because Moderna doesn't have a patent on the genome of a coronavirus with the furon cleavage site. Moderna has a patent on a protein, a genetically engineered protein that has a furon cleavage site. That's not a big deal because nearly every genetically engineered protein that will end up in a human being at any point in time, again, that's not a widely used practice yet. That will be in the future. That's going to be a massive revolution in medical technology, as was the mRNA vaccine, was a massive revolution in medical technology, regardless of how the government botched the distribution of it. That was a revolution in medical technology. This genetically engineered proteins is going to be a massive revolution in medical technology. And any protein that's genetically engineered that's going into your body is likely to hijack. They're going to likely program it to hijack certain body processes like furon cleavage to utilize it. So I'm a programmer. That's what I do. So I use a lot of if-then statements. I use a lot of for loops. I use a lot of else statements or transposition of arrays and etc. Every program uses those. Every program uses if-then statements. This is the equivalent of me writing a program that has an if-then statement in it, and then me looking at a completely different program and saying, oh my God, it's the same code. Well, what do you mean? Well, it's got an if-then statement in it. Yeah, but it does something completely different. Yeah, but where did they get the if-then statement? Do you think that they stole it from me? No, it's just a common tool in programming for me to use an if-then statement. It's a common tool in genetic engineering to use a furon cleavage site. So all this does is further support the notion that genetic engineers had a hand in COVID and COVID's origination point. However, Moderna, this has no way links Moderna to that whatsoever. I program code. Russia has people that program code. Russia sometimes locks up our oil pipes or tries to blow up a food plant with their coders. Just because I code with the same if-then statements that they do doesn't mean I'm also blowing up stuff in a terroristic act. So just because China has genetic engineers working on bioweapons doesn't necessarily mean Moderna is also working on bioweapons. They just happen to be using very common sequences that are used in every genetic engineering situation. Just as I use if-then statements that are very common in every programming situation. So this was absurd fake news that Dyer brought to my attention and forced me to get down a rabbit hole on, because he's like, Fox, this is real. This has got to be. Alex Jones said it was real. He was so convinced that no, he was not.
We throw stories on the nose all the time for the purpose of investigating them, and more often than you might think, we have to throw stories out entirely because this is a fake story. We can just either disregard it entirely, or just the story will be that it was a fake story, so you can tell the audience about something so they don't get fooled by it.
Yeah. So this is the type of story that is trying to prey on your novice experience with genetic engineering. The type of, I'm not a geneticist, but the type of investigation I had to do into this, it took a while. It took about an hour and a half, but it wasn't impossible for me to find out. And so you've got something like the Daily Mail, who's pumping this out as though it's real. And again, they're showing this as if they're not telling you that Moderna is making a completely unrelated protein. They're telling you that, Moderna's got a patent and it looks like COVID, and that's just not true. Again, there's a lot of programs that are patented. I bet you that there are classified military programs that Dyer uses every day that have if-then statements in it. And I bet you I have if-then statements in my code. Does that mean that Dyer stole my code?
Oh my God! You have classified materials?
Yeah, I've got classified materials.
Oh
my gosh! Yeah,
the FBI are on their way.
Yeah, I've got classified materials on my computer because I have an if-then statement on my program, and the CIA and the military have if-then statements in their programs. Therefore, I stole their programs, and I have the same program, same if-then statement that Chinese hacker does, and so I'm also a hacker terrorist, I guess. No. So this is a fake story. If you guys hear it, shut it down. Don't believe it. It's not real.
Just like I gotta go pet my dogs and see if Fox has mercy upon you, lets you leave. Hey Fox, I need to pet my dogs.
All right. Well, the show's over. Dyer has to go pet his dogs and give them waffles. That is his only responsibility, is to give his dogs waffles. Let's do an F in chat or a lemon to have Dyer give his dogs waffles. Yes.
Is this one waffle per every F?
Yes. W's in chats for waffles. Everyone's giving F. So, all right. So you have to go give your dog waffles.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, we have a few more stories. We will consider doing a show later this week. But thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. And
see you guys later. Dire Wolf out.
Trevize signing off. See you guys.
It was a lemon. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to Brolf.